The Visualcast is a hybrid podcast where we sit down with some of the best, most interesting, and most exciting visual artists from all over the world. We chat about life, art, visuals, software, hardware, systems, crystals, alien downloads, spirituality, and catalysts. It's essentially a massive nerd out. But the guests also do a set where we dive into their computer and get an up-and-close look at how they make art, how they perform art, or really anything they want to share with us. I really hope you guys enjoy this episode. To support us, please like and subscribe, follow us on Instagram, and leave us a review on Spotify. Now, without any further ado, here's the Visualcast.
The world is like a ride at an amusement park, and it's fun for a while. Some people have been on the ride for a long time, and they begin to question, is this real, or is this just a ride? And other people have remembered, and they come back to us, and they say, hey, don't worry, don't be afraid, ever, because this is just a ride.
Welcome. Joined today by super special guest, extremely fascinating artist, someone who personally I've been following for a very long time, and I feel kind of excited and a little bit nervous that he's on, but it's super honoring to have him on. He's really a legend in the field of liquid light magic and analog visuals, and his reputation precedes him. Liquid Light Labs, Steve Pavlovsky. Welcome to the podcast.
Yo, what up? Hello, everybody. Thanks for having me on, man. Been looking forward to this.
Thank you for coming on. This is really an honor. So I like to start off with a little bit of a scripted question, and then we can get more into the conversation. Steve, Mr. Liquid Light, you're quite the legend in the liquid light shows world and in the visuals VJ world in general. You have basically ushered in a new generation of liquid light artists and kept the interest, innovation, and inspiration within this field of analog visuals alive and well. Your performance resume is extremely impressive. From TV shows, films, and some of my personal favorite rock bands, I was pretty blown away when I went through the list, and I got to just name a few, which is a very small few, but the ones that were interesting to me. Nick Mason of Pink Floyd, like, wow. Phil Lesh from the Grateful Dead, wow. Brian Jonestown's Massacre, I can't wait to hear about that. You worked on TV shows Atlanta, Euphoria. You've been featured in Nature Science Journal, and you've done countless planetarium performances, dome performances. So, I mean, what a breathtaking career. You should be extremely proud, and you know, I'm really excited to see how you continue that. How do you even top those things? I'm excited to see that. So to start things off, what is it like performing a completely unique experience every time, in some ways not knowing what's going to happen and just trusting your skills and talents?
Oh, that's a good question. I mean, it's kind of like, because it's improvisational, so it's like, it's almost like improvisational music or something where it's like a never-ending beat. The song never ends. So like when it gets going and you're doing it well with the visuals, it's like you tap into like this this stream that's like always there. You know what I mean? Like when it works, when you catch it right and it's like a good wave, it's like, you know, it's just like you open it up and suddenly this thing that's always existing is there. Yeah, I mean, and doing it like, yeah, I mean, it's it can be a struggle sometimes, right? Because it's like I don't know what's going to happen. Sometimes things aren't working right, but then eventually, you get your groove, and then it just starts going.
Hell yeah. I'm sure you must be like a massive flow state person. You know, I can imagine that, like, obviously coming from a digital realm, you know, getting into the flow state is very specific, or I should say it's like maybe more of something that you're kind of like connecting to through some sort of, what's the word? Like not vicariously, but like, or vicariously, like, you know, I'm playing with a MIDI controller, and because I'm like performing with the MIDI controller, then I'm now in the music, you know, or maybe I'm making some, like I do a lot of generative visuals, so maybe I'm like get the right parameters and all of a sudden it's like, you know, feeling it and I'm in it. But for you, it's like you're literally like physically touching, moving, and, you know, utilizing things. I think it's probably a lot more synonymous with a flow state, because you're just like literally, you have to be in a flow to like, you know, drop the thing in the right place. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Oh yeah, sure. Yeah. I mean, yeah. I mean, that definitely is part of it for sure. You know, that's like the thing that like really attracted me to it at first, was because I used like these cameras and stuff that we'll talk about. But, you know, originally I started using overhead projectors, like a classic, you know, old school classroom overhead projector. That's like the traditional way that liquid light shows and, you know, light shows were used as one of the primary instruments. But the first thing that attracted me was like the immediacy. Like you put your hands on the thing, even if it's just your hands, and you see it, like you're literally touching the screen. And that immediacy, like, was really, I was like, oh, this is, I see. I like, because originally I was going to do, like, I've been doing this for 16 years. And originally I was going to like use Flash animation. And like, I don't know, I'm a little older, right? But I don't know if the younger people know about it, but Flash was a way to make websites and interactive things. And you would like press buttons and link them to like macros and commands. And originally I was going to make like, you know, just this interface or press buttons and it would start making like shapes and stuff move. But financially, you know, this was also a while ago. So I couldn't afford a laptop at the time. I couldn't afford a digital projector. But I had known about the liquid light shows and stuff because, like, I known about like rock history and all that stuff. I was always into it. So I was like, oh, but you know, maybe I could try this. And like literally, the moment I tried it, I was like, oh, I don't have to program anything. You know, I was like, I can just do this right then and there, and that immediacy of it, like, really just clicked and, you know, attracted me to it.
I love that. It's so interesting that you, like, your path could have gone to like real time generative visuals, and you went to real-time generative visuals. You know what I mean? Like,
right. Yeah.
It's like just digital analog, but like the same kind of trajectory in some crazy way. Super interesting. The immediacy, I totally understand what you're saying. Like, obviously with the digital aspect, the immediacy is after you program everything, right? And like the more you program something to be immediate, then you get that immediacy. And that's like, if my stuff isn't responding immediately, or like, you know, the things that I do aren't immediate, then it's not fun. It becomes like, it becomes, you become disconnected from what you're doing, you know? So I totally, you know, relate to that and totally understand that. It's even more direct. It's kind of like, not a great analogy, but, you know, like a singer is like, their voice is the instrument, right? Like they're like literally, they're releasing, like a dancer, their art is their body. A singer, their art is their voice, right? Like a guitarist, his art is still there, but like he's got one step removed from like his body, you know? And like you're way more closer to your release of art than like any of us digital artists, because we have to go through, you know, a crazy modality and crazy like, you know, system to get to where we're needing. You're just like bloop, bloop. Could be even as simple as, like you said, like just your hands in front of the thing. It's very direct. I really like that.
Yeah, that part too. I mean, I do use like a system, because I do use like Resolume and MIDI and all that stuff. But the whole system with everything plugged into it, I think of it as like almost like an octopus. Like it's like my fingers and my hands are there, but this whole thing is stretching out and then creating, you know, and it's like weird. Like I know like where every little part of like my setup is and like what it's doing. Like I can, you know, get one track minded on that and just kind of think of, I think in this. Like this is like
sure.
I'm literally, I'm like thinking in this when I'm doing it.
I can imagine. I can imagine.
Yeah.
So let's go a little bit backwards. You were just mentioning to me before we started recording where you were born and kind of where you grew up. I'd love to kind of hear a little bit more about that. You know, being born in Czechoslovakia, or I guess Czech Republic, which would be now, and coming to America. You grew up in New York, is that right? like in your later
Yeah, I
years?
grew up in New York City. Yeah, no,
Nice.
my whole life.
Your whole life.
I moved away a bit in my 20s, but pretty much lived here. Yeah.
Yeah, please tell us, because I think it was super fascinating to hear a little bit of the origin and kind of like, you're a different generation, and it's always interesting to kind of like get the background of that generation, because it's so different than what we know.
Oh yeah. I mean, I'm like of the generation. It was probably the last generation to not see internet and then have internet. Like when we were
Right.
kids, I feel lucky in that, in the respect that I was able to be part of that generation where, like, we were kids, none of this stuff was a thing. Then
Yeah.
in the 90s it started up, and then it blossomed. So you're able to see clearly the before and after. But I was born in '78, and when it used to be Czechoslovakia, it was a communist country, and we came here in 1981 as political refugees. My father was a big political dissident. My mother too. He was a political prisoner for a while. The occupation and the situation there wasn't great, and so they, resisted it and got in a lot of trouble. And basically, we had to leave the country. Place like that tells you like what job you have, where you live, where
Right.
your kids go to school. So it was a
Yeah.
problem. So we moved to Vienna for a little bit, but even though it's the next country over, it's one of these things where they don't like Czech people. Like, they're their neighbors, but they don't like, yeah, at least at the time. So it was difficult for them to, get like work and everything. But then because of like my father's like, involvement with like, messing with the government and all that too, they did welcome us here as political refugees. So we
Mm.
applied for asylum over there, came here, and then, you know, grew up in New York City, like starting in '81. It was a much different place than it is now. It was like
Mm.
it was like the old New York, that like was definitely broken down, and there's
Yeah.
violence and crazy. It was way pre-gentrification,
Yeah. Yeah.
but
Pre
it was
Giuliani,
cool. I
right?
mean, oh yeah, yeah. This was like Ed Koch. Yeah, this was
Mm.
like
Wow. Wow. Wow.
1980s, and
Like
you
sex
know,
shops everywhere and prostitutes
yeah,
and
yeah, definitely. I mean, where we used to live, I lived we grew up, we did live in Manhattan for a bit, but then we just like lived in a welfare hotel, and then eventually there's a small Czech community. My father found his first job, and eventually moved to Queens, and we moved into different places in Queens. But like the neighborhood where we kind of like spent my youth, it's called Ridgewood, which is like a popular place
mm,
now. And it's next to Bushwick, which people might have heard of. But
of course
back when I was a kid, it was like really like I
intense.
still go there. I go there, and I'm still like I still can't believe that like people are walking around like, because it was you would get like, you don't, if you're not from there or it didn't look like anybody there, you're definitely going to get robbed, and at least, and probably beaten up. I
Being
mean,
yeah.
everybody's been, yeah, it wasn't great, and it was like all like, it was bad. I mean, they a lot of it was like empty lots of like rubble with packs of wild dogs running around. Like, it was crazy.
Jesus Christ.
And like our neighborhood was right next to it, and our apartment building got robbed a few times, and like
Wow.
it was nuts. And then my father became a Second Amendment, exercised his Second Amendment rights and all that, and we eventually moved out of the neighborhood. But that's like how bad it was. I mean,
That's
he
crazy.
obtained that legally, but yeah, it wasn't great.
Especially
You
considering
know,
like isn't Bushwick like hipster central now? Like isn't it like a
it is.
serious like
It's
hipster gentrification?
it yeah, it is and it isn't. I mean, it's a mix. It's like people, there's a lot of public housing there, and this typically has been like Puerto Rican people and things like that live there, and they have like long term. People have been living there for generations, so people aren't like leaving exactly, but they are, parts of it are being pushed out. It's this weird mix of
Mm.
like the old Bushwick and the
The
new people
new
that come there
post,
and
yeah.
stuff like that. But I mean, it wasn't all bad. I shouldn't like say like New York City was this crazy like
I'm sure it
violent
must have
place.
been like electric and vibrant. It must have been, now it's
hundred
so
percent.
like like everywhere in America, it's like everything's kind of lost its
Yeah.
spark.
I mean,
Everything looks the
the
same.
80s. was cool, but the 90s were really cool because like my memory of it is like New York City was all these different subcultures,
Mm.
you know, and then you would like go out. This is like when I would get a little bit older and start coming of age and start going to the city or going out and stuff. And you have all these different like subcultures, right? You have like graffiti kids, skate kids, ravers, metalheads, and different people would kind of still be stuck in their little pockets. But you would go out and you can go to a different part of the city and totally interact with a different subculture. And that was like really cool. I feel like things have homogenized significantly in New York, and that excitement of like, you go and you see something new from like a different type of styles or whatever, and you're like, oh wow, this is I like this, or oh, that's kind of weird, but you would interact with stuff. And I think that culturally I felt it was a lot more vibrant. I mean, maybe I'm old and jaded now, but that's the way that I remember it. Was the culture was definitely like thick and all over the place, and uniqueness was kind of important to people.
Interesting.
Not being like everybody else was kind of an important value, at least to me it was.
Yeah, I mean, that's very, I feel like, I was a kid in the 90s. I was only like a teenager in the early thousands, but like you kind of felt that was like a fleeting thing. Obviously I grew up in Israel, totally different than New York City, but like I know what you're saying of like this like kind of everything becomes the same. Like there was no, like the individuality wasn't as like put on a pedestal as it was, when I was younger. Like it just looks like a completely different thing. So I can imagine like in a place like New York City that's so multicultural, so many different types of subsects, and a hub for art and culture for forever, really. And you look at it now and it's basically just like, everything kind of looks the same. I mean, Times Square is an abomination, and it's like some places in Brooklyn are cool, but it's like kind of every borough is kind of the same. It's like you got this store, you got that store, you got this main street. It's like very very homogenous, like you said.
As a kid, like I remember that we didn't actually have like a lot of chain stores, and it was like this weird thing where like you go outside to the rest of America and you go to like the suburbs and you'd see like chain stores. And because you see on TV, in a weird way, to me, that was like what America was, because you see it everywhere. And we didn't have, like, I remember when we first started getting chain stores, kind of, it's terrible to say, but it's actually feeling like good about it, because like, oh, we're like catching up to the rest of America.
You're excited about
like,
it.
I didn't really,
right.
Yeah, I didn't understand what that really meant. So not that excited about it now. But at the time, I remember being like, oh, wow, we have a chain store. It's not this weird mom and pop shop, and thinking that was like,
gonna help somehow. I mean, whatever, it all got swallowed up by Amazon anyways. It doesn't really even matter,
I mean, totally.
So growing up in New York sounds super interesting. And was just before we move on, because I just want to ask, are your parents still alive? Is your parents still alive?
Yeah. They live half the year. They're retired, and because we weren't able to go back until like 1990 because of the communist situation. Like we weren't allowed to go back until like the Berlin Wall fell and all that stuff. So eventually my parents retired, and they spent half the year there and half the year actually in Las Cruces, New Mexico.
Oh, wow.
They're adventurous people. Like my mother later on worked at an airline, so we were able to get free airline tickets. Like we didn't have money.
Nice.
Like, my dad was like a janitor, so we didn't have any money, but my mother was an airline person. We had free airline tickets, and we can get like good deals on stuff. We actually traveled a lot. My parents traveled a lot, and they loved traveling. And in their retirement, they ended up volunteering at like national parks to be caretakers. Wow. It's kind of like a thing for like retired people, and eventually would do it around the United States, and eventually settled in Las Cruces. They made friends. It was a big retirement community. And like, big retirement community, and basically like found a second home there. And it's cool. And they bought a house fairly cheap a few years ago. Yeah.
It's awesome. Do you ever like get a chance to hear some of the political dissident stories? I mean, I find that fascinating.
Oh, yeah.
Like, it's also like one of those things that's stuck in time. Like, obviously there are political dissidents today, but you don't, I mean, it's very rare that you hear a lot about them because either they're just like locked up super fast and, you know, the media is controlled in a way that, you know, is kind of unprecedented. Or there's just maybe not as many as there used to be. I don't know. I don't know what really is, but like, yeah, I mean, it must be super fascinating to hear some of those stories.
Yeah, I mean, like, over there, my understanding, I mean, I'm sure I'm getting a lot wrong because you hear this stuff growing up and you don't really pay attention to your parents. It's not like they're old, they're like old people's stories or whatever. And now that I'm older, I'm like, I'm trying my best to learn more about my family and all that stuff. But my understanding is that like the resistance, because it's a small country, and it wasn't like a violent resistance. It was like a cultural resistance where they would have like underground plays that people would go to. And
Wow.
and this play would be like saying things that you're not allowed to say and stuff like that, but it was like illegal to do something like that, so like you can get arrested or hurt for going to see a play or seeing a band that's like a protest band. So like that's my understanding. I do know my mother, to make money, would it's kind of interesting, they didn't have Xerox machines, so to take leaflets or like newsletters or whatever, she would type them and get paid per page. This is apparently I was like a baby and she'd be sitting there typing. But what's interesting is they'd have to bring a special typewriter because on a microscopic level, you can match up every letter has its own little microscopic imperfections, right? So once you have to hide the typewriter itself because you know what I'm saying?
Yeah. So you could tie it back to her.
The organization would have this thing hidden. They'd bring it to her. She'd type it, and they take this typewriter and hide it because of the little imperfections.
That's
when you look at it with a microscope.
It's like shaving off the pin on a gun or something, serial number on a gun or something, so you can't tie it back.
It's totally like the inside of a barrel of a gun. Yeah.
Wow, that's so cool. See, that's like that stuff is so like juicy. It's like these little small things, and the fact that you're saying that it wasn't a violent rebellion or a violent kind of like a protest or whatever is totally interesting. I would never imagine that. When I think of, I don't know enough about Czechoslovakia. I know more about like what happened, Berlin Wall kind of thing situation, and all the massacres that happened when the power shifted, and in Croatia there was a big massacre when the power shifted. I know a little bit about that. But like, pre that stuff, kind of like when communism was kind of at the height, I really don't know much about it. And it's super interesting because you would think violence, let's like, fuck the government, let's, break shit and whatever. But I guess it was like a totally different type of thing.
Yeah, you couldn't get away with that there. I mean, it was just like they had a lock. I mean, I don't know how much time I'm going to spend on it, but like the background of it is like after World War II, right? This was, first country that was occupied by Hitler, right? Was Czechoslovakia. And then, I mean, this is one of these places where they've always kind of had problems. It's a small country, so it kind of at times gets taken over and, becoming a part of other empires. But after the war, it was the Soviets that came in and rescued them, from the Nazis. And so it's kind of like this, like split, like it was like, exactly, quote unquote rescued, but it became a puppet state. It became like this, like it's basically, it was like Soviet, it was like a form of colonialism or imperialism where they're trying to, spread their,
expand,
and then so basically they're on the westernmost part of like the Iron Curtain countries. But basically, like they wanted to kind of become more Western, and Moscow was like, no, and there was problems with the government. Eventually, in like I believe 1968 or something like that, maybe it was 69. I gotta get the date straight. My dad said he was in Prague. He was like 17. Said it sounded like a plane was circling the city. What it really was Moscow sending tons of planes, landing them with tanks, and taking off nonstop. And
just
eventually,
like landing.
Oh yeah.
Wow.
And then you can see pictures of this, and they funneled, mass, columns of tanks down the main street. There was violence for about 3 days. My father said the guy next to him, and he told me this like on the way to college. He's like, I mean, it's not funny, honestly, but he's like, that he was like, when I was your age, the guy we were protesting, and the guy I was standing next to, his head exploded because he got shot.
Jesus.
You know, and he's like, you're going to college, and I was just being like, wow, this is fucking wild, man.
Yeah.
You know, so that
perspective
affected him
is
at
crazy.
17. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then basically they protested for 3 days. They couldn't do anything about the might of, you know, the Soviet army being there. And then it went into an underground type of, you know, resistance movement.
Right.
My understanding is that a lot of like the male people in our family or friends and stuff would just get arrested for all kinds of weird things. I believe there was one guy was hiking too close to the Polish border and did like a year in jail over something like that. You know, like, but you know, so this was an oppressive system, and then the economy doesn't work so well in a system like that. So there's a lot of shortages, you know, all over the place. So there were times when they would just have to like they say there'll be like no fish in the supermarket, and suddenly one day all the shelves get stocked with all the same kind of fish,
Right.
like, and they're gone. Like it would just be this crazy inefficient system of shortages that they're dealing with, plus not being able to say anything, plus them telling you where you go to.
Right, no freedom of religion, of culture, of anything like that. Yeah.
Christianity was actually a big form of protest there in that, you know, that's why like Pope John Paul was big. And I think that's probably why he became the Pope, was because he was a Polish guy, and that was part of the resistance. Was because you weren't supposed to do that. So people actually became more Christian because, you know,
as a resistance.
Yeah, because they're not going to go and shoot people in the church, right? Yeah. You know, but yeah, I mean, there's just crazy stuff there. I mean, it's a trauma-ridden area. You know, my grandma was in World War II, and all that stuff.
It's crazy how these people, you know, they went from World War II to like you said, like being saved by the Russians, to then being enslaved by the Russians, to then being, you know, the Berlin Wall coming down, and like now they have to like assimilate into like Western culture, and it's like, what do we do? It's gonna, you know, it like takes a long time to understand how to like even do things Western like.
Oh yeah, when I used to go there, I mean, we actually just celebrated the 35th anniversary of it, like 2 days ago or something like that, of the Berlin Wall coming down, and so we weren't able to see my family, right, all throughout childhood, and then maybe I was like, I think maybe 11 or something like that, 12. We were able to go over there. First 6 months, we were able to go over there. And this is like 6 months after communism was done. So it was just like, I mean, it was like a weird Wild West where it was so different. And it was a night and day thing. You know, I was a punk little kid. I didn't appreciate it. Like, I wanted to spend summer in New York City with my friends. I didn't want to go to what I considered a backwards country at the time with these old people. And but looking back on it, I'm super thankful that I got to see something like that. You know, now Czech Republic is really nice. They're doing better there now than we are here in America.
Totally. I mean, they have, you know, drugs are legal, like are decriminalized. I mean, it's like a pretty progressive place.
Yeah, and I mean it's European living seems to be a little bit better than American living right now.
I mean, yeah. Let's hope things change. Let's hope things change. Who knows what's going to happen? So first of all, thank you for sharing all that. It's really fascinating, and you know, I it's very close to my heart. Like, I don't want to get too into it, but you know, my grandfather of Russian descent during that time he would smuggle into Russia like Jewish paraphernalia, because obviously you couldn't practice Judaism. So he would smuggle in like, you know, prayer books and different types of Jewish stuff. And he would bring with him like rabbis and, you know, circumcision people to do all these rituals for the people in, you know, communist Russia. And he had like, you know, he got recognized by the government like 10 years ago or something as like a national hero for like a Russian Jewry and everything. And he wrote a whole book about it, but it's like something that was very, you know, it's very dear to me, because it's like in that realm and in that region of the world, we take for granted like the freedoms and, you know, simplicity of life that we have in a global scheme, right? Oh, you know, we have this bad politician, and we have this bullshit, and we have that bullshit. And it's like, well, you know, it could be way, 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 way worse, you know?
It changes. definitely a change of perspective, and then there's that like Eastern European stereotype it's like comical, but it's like they're always like, oh, it can be a lot worse.
It could be a lot worse. It's like
it can always be worse, and it's like, oh, just but I did kind of grow up with that kind of like mentality, like, yeah, things can be a lot worse than they are now, and that's not at all to say that America doesn't have its problems. I mean,
no, it has a lot of
problems.
They're
different. It's got a phenomenal amount of problems.
totally, and it's compounding as well. I think for a long time already.
Different.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. I mean, it's just, you know. But the one thing that I did like a post about this, because I painted like some panels of the Berlin Wall for the anniversary for the Czech Center here in New York.
Nice.
And the one thing that we symbolically tore them down and stuff for the 20th anniversary. And one thing though that did come to mind was like, and my parents told me this when I talked to them the other day after the election, like, you're going to live through a lot of governments. Like, we've lived through several governments. I've seen where we came from totally go into a different place, and there's an ebb and flow, and you see this happening. So, there is some solace. I think I'm saying that right. That,
Solace,
that things will, nothing is really permanent. Even the worst things that you can think of, they do go through, and that's the hope that I have right now is,
things will change for sure.
Things do change, and America's a good place for change, I think.
I think so too. I love America very much. So big shift. Growing up in New York, and kind of, being a child of like, the 80s and 90s, you must have gotten to see some super cool music concerts and kind of experience, visuals like before they became what they are now. Can you maybe like give us a little bit of anecdote of like what were some of the first ones that you see, or maybe the ones that just stuck with you for a long time, and then how did you get into visuals and liquid light magic?
Sure. I honestly didn't grow up seeing a lot of visuals. It really, like Pink Floyd had that. My mother was really into Pink Floyd. Again, it's one of these things at the time. I could have went to see them at Yankee Stadium in like the 90s. Punk kid, didn't see the value of it. Now I'm like, oh, shit, I missed that one. But anyway, that I knew about, visuals and projections there. But otherwise, like the music that I was into would have been like, like hardcore punk music, or like I also like rave, that kind. I didn't really go out to raves that much though. I liked it, but I was kind of more on the periphery of that kind of scene. But I didn't really. My first real introduction, I would say, to visuals, which is kind of what I do now, is like we had the Monterey Pop film on videotape. Monterey Pop was like a year before Woodstock. It's the one where Jimi Hendrix burns the guitar, and that has an old school light show from Glenn McKay and Jerry Abrams, the headlights. I think it might have been the last show possibly they did together. These are legends in the thing.
Yeah.
So I remember like seeing all that stuff like on the video, and so I'd known that this stuff happens. I was also like into rock, so like reading different rock, books like biographies and things. I hear about visuals, but I really didn't see it much until maybe like the early 2000s. I saw Gibby Haynes and his Problem. Gibby Haynes from the Butthole Surfers, and he had projections. I did get into lights proper, and I started like seeing Fish in the late 90s. And so Chris Kuroda, right, I remember like seeing him do things with lights, not visuals, but with lights. I was like, oh shit, I didn't know you could do that. And it blew my mind the first time. I really didn't like Fish until I saw them live, and then I was like, oh wow. And I've been going for like 20. Yeah, and I've been going for like 20 years now, probably more than that. Just because, in part, the lights really blew my mind that they were able to do things with those. But as far as visuals go, like I didn't even really see a lot. I saw that. I would, Gibby Haynes' Problem. There was this festival, Wakarusa in Kansas, that I went to maybe in like the early 2004 or so. I saw people doing liquids there. Couple of like small festivals. I went to college in upstate New York. I would see some people bring like a projector and play like cartoons and stuff, and we'd be like tripping out and watching them play like cartoons on a big projector while the band's playing, and thinking that's like really cool. But I just didn't have a lot of exposure to it in a lot of ways until I started doing it. You know, it's kind of
Interesting.
a weird thing. Yeah, I can't say that I really have influences in terms of like seeing something other than
Mhm.
really like Chris Kuroda and Fish, you know. Then though I did start getting into it and then start meeting people online and then watching stuff and getting to know people that
What
way.
was the catalyst for you to want to get into it? Like, what is your background? Is your background in art? Like, I kind of skipped, past your childhood
Yeah.
to kind of your background. But yeah, I mean, like, what were you doing and wanting to get into it? Like, what was the
So
reason?
I majored in philosophy for college. So
Ooh,
I
now it
don't
all
make
makes
any
sense.
money. I don't make any money, but at least I know why. You know, so that's the thing. It's like my 20s, I kind of didn't know what to do, so like with my life. So I kind of spent my 20s doing like odd jobs. I was a pedicab driver. I was a bike messenger in New York for a while. I was technically a professional cyclist in my 20s, from pedicabbing and bike messengering for like 6 or something years. Whatever. There's a lot of stuff that I can go into, all those kind of details. But I also played music. I've always kind of been creative. Didn't really think that a creative outlet was a way to try and make a living, because being like an
Mm-hmm.
immigrant and a first generation, like zero generation, it was risky. Like it never occurred to me you should try to like make money doing this. I
Mm-hmm.
thought, I was like on the impression like, oh, you become a lawyer or something, right? One of those
Mm-hmm.
kind of things. You want to do
Yeah.
something that's going to make you some money. So it never occurred to me. But I had always played music. I'd always been creative and done all kinds of things. I played music, was into graffiti a lot, still kind of
Cool.
am. Um, and so I'd always done creative things, and playing in bands, I'd always like make like the album cover art and stuff like that, or do the mixing and stuff,
Oh, gotcha.
and then so I'd always had like creative outlets, making websites for the bands. I always loved doing that
Mm-hmm.
kind of stuff, or even making
Interesting.
like weird prank websites and stuff in like the early 2000s. I would do
Prank
that for fun.
websites?
Yeah, just kind of putting like just weird stuff, because I was like, oh, like I don't know if you know the Simpsons episode where Homer makes a website and he just takes like logos from every like
I
thing,
don't
just puts it
know.
on a thing. He's like, I made a website, and Lisa's like, no, you just took logos. I was just doing weird stuff because I was fascinated that you can put something on the internet.
Right.
That was cool. But anyway, I played in bands for a long time, and then I was
Mm-hmm.
playing with a band.
What music?
The band,
What kind of instrument do you play?
a bunch of them. Started off with guitar, then I got into
Mm.
like bass, then I got into like
Wow.
keyboards and production, like with samplers, synthesizers and stuff.
Interesting.
And then eventually, I also started playing like the 5-string banjo. I went back to school at one
No way.
point and majored in music, and then yeah, we played in a band upstate where we toured, and we'd be like part country band, part jazz, and part like our own brand of weird rock. So I played the
Wow.
5-string banjo. Now I'd say the bass is my main instrument, but like I loved music, but I'm a competent musician, but I
Mm-hmm.
never had what it takes to get there. Right. I definitely don't have that. Whatever it is to get to the next level, like I'm competent, but I know that
Mm-hmm.
I don't have that. But then I started
Interesting.
playing with a band. They had a terrible. I quit the band because there's always drama in bands. But I hung out with them. They were good
Right.
friends, and they had good music, but they had a terrible stage presence.
Uh
And
huh.
I was like, man, you guys just like are so boring to watch. I was like, I gotta do something for you guys. And I was like, I gotta give you guys like a light show or something, because you just guys sit there and stare at the floor, and your music's great, but you're boring. And that was the catalyst for that, And it was
Really?
just
Just
at
helping
time.
your buddies out? That's crazy.
Yeah, yeah. They actually bought my first overhead projector, and this is the thing. Like the moment I started doing it, because I'd always done weird creative things, right? Making like weird albums on tape and then CDs and whatever, or anything creative I'd done. The moment I started doing the visuals, like there was a palpable feeling of like people coming up to me, and you can feel that energy of the interest. Like this was almost from day one. People are like, "Oh wow, this is really cool." And I mean, it was a terrible light show looking back on it. Very very undeveloped compared to what I do now. But even then, there was a lot of interest in it. And then the band I was playing with, there's always drama with bands, and then I had some other friends ask me to do it, and kind of took off from there. I was going back to school for like a third time for graphic design at the time, and then kind of doing this parallel thing, thinking I was going to become a graphic designer. But then people kept on asking me to do these gigs. And then so it's kind of like I'm not even trying, and people are asking me to do stuff. So that just alone was that palpable energy that I felt in terms of, you know, there's definitely something there. I can see people reacting to this in ways that they never did for any of my other art or creative things. And, you know, went on from there. I was like, I can develop this thing that on my own. And then, like, you know, I mean, I can keep talking, but then there was other evolutions of the liquid light journey, because then I realized, okay, there's this whole history about this stuff that's kind of underrepresented, was never poorly documented. And so I started getting into that part, you know, because I was like, there wasn't many people when I started doing this in like 2007. I started in 2007. First public performance, I believe, was 2008 in April. There was, at least as far as the internet goes, I'm sure there was more people doing it. There were probably 20 active light shows, like old school light shows in America. We'll say 20 to 50. I'm sure I'm missing something. I don't want to leave anybody behind, but, you know, let's just say there was 20 to 50 between like America and Canada doing it. And I saw that there wasn't, it was like there wasn't a lot of people doing it. So I had that. I know that there's this long history to it, you know, that people really, that hadn't been quote unquote reclaimed yet, you know. So that also got me into like the whole, you know, quasi educational element of it that I'm involved with, in terms of like trying to tell people, because people will come up to me and go, oh, how'd you invent this? And I'm like, I did invent this. I'm like, you don't know about this? Because I'd known about it since I was a kid, but I was like, no,
it's a little bit of a lost, it's a little bit of a lost art, right? Because it's like, and I kind of wanted to talk to you a little bit about the history of kind of not liquid light specifically, but just visuals and analog visuals, because it goes back to like the 1500s. I don't know if you're familiar with. Are you familiar with the light organ, color organ?
Yeah. There's a few of them. Yeah, there's a couple of them here and there. This guy Bertrand, maybe one guy.
No. Yes, that's definitely one of the guys.
Ones. Yeah.
There's a bunch of people that did it, and it's basically this like, you know, this is a very rudimentary image of it, but it's kind of like a keyboard organ that would have like different light bulbs with different colors that would kind of like light up based on the keys that they were playing. I did like this research, I can't remember, for this course that I did like a few years ago, and I found this super cool video of a guy who found like a 1700s like light organ, and he restored all the bulbs and everything. I can't find the video. I think it's been taken off the internet. I don't know why, but yeah, I mean, it's such an interesting history when it comes to like, you know, where this thing kind of started and where it came from and like what it became. There's also Mary Hallock Greenwald. Have you heard of her? Mary Elizabeth Greenwald?
No, I have not. Oh, you know what? Maybe, but I don't. Not right now.
She's like Ottoman Empire, Syrian kind of woman. I'm just kind of like paraphrasing here on her Wikipedia, but essentially she basically bought the color organ to like the 20th century, not 21st, 20th century, and her art was called Norather, which is like an Arab word of light and essence, and she would perform with it. She was like one of the first audio-visual artists, you know, that would like kind of do these like really crazy like light shows with like philharmonic, you know, with orchestras, and it was all these like, I'll show you this picture. It was all like these it was like a very rudimentary kind of thing. So it was like this big machine, right? And then she would have these slips.
I've seen this. Yeah.
She would have these slips that would go in like almost like a slide projector almost, but like obviously way before that even existed. You know, so I just think that that's crazy that, you know, and again, it's like, so you have, you know, early 16th century all the way to like, you know, 20th century, kind of like this weird kind of like thing that maybe isn't even like, it's like magic and it's like, you know, mystery. And then in the 60s, you all of a sudden you have this like crazy like visuals, liquid light, you know, like all these really interesting kind of like things happening, and then it goes away and it kind of like, you don't really hear about it. And then projection mapping, digital visuals take over the thing. So it's just like, I find it fascinating how it's like this kind of like up and down kind of like trajectory of this art form.
Definitely up and down. Yeah.
But there's always like a line, there's always a through line, right? There's always like this through line.
There's totally a through line. Yeah. I mean, that,
So,
my
please.
the way I look at it, right? I mean, it's natural for people to play with light. Person gets like little kid gets like a mirror, gets like a light shining at it. It bounces off. They're like, oh, cool. A lot of kids get drawn to that. I mean, going old. This is kind of esoteric, but like the first
Oh, I
light
like
shows,
that.
like people dancing around the fire,
Hell
in
yeah, dude,
shadows
for
and
sure.
all that stuff,
For
right?
sure.
There are, I think maybe in perhaps like Jakarta, there was people going back hundreds of years doing shadow plays where they would have like lights and shadows. And I might be getting that wrong, but basically that came. Then you would have kind of had like, I read somewhere that even Leonardo da Vinci for a wedding did this whole thing where he did like
Light
candles with well, yeah, he had like candles and like colored liquids and would set them off in a sequence for
Wow.
I don't know if that's true, but I read that somewhere. But then
I can imagine. Why not? Like, it's such a
Yeah.
rudimentary thing. Why wouldn't they? Right? Like,
Yeah.
especially somebody smart like that. That's like, oh, if I bring color into light, it's gonna do this. Like, why wouldn't they?
Yeah. Well, the real thing where kind of what we all do now really starts from arguably would be the magic lantern shows. Magic lanterns would be like these rudimentary slide. First, they were done with like kerosene and stuff, and if you look at them, they're look up magic lanterns. They'd be
Yep.
these slides that inside of them would have different like layers. So let's say you'd have like a face, and suddenly like the nose would be another layer, and it could be like a comical thing where suddenly like the nose would get bigger, but really it's just two panels and one sliding and making like the nose
Right.
come out
Like
and
like a
back, or
forced
like you
perspective, or not, like a parallax effect
or
almost.
well, it would be like actually like a physical slides, or let's just say an arm, right? So you'd have a character and they'd be still. These are like very early attempts at animation, and then their arm would be on another piece of glass that they would have on a lever, and so they can start going like this and make the
Gotcha.
character's lever move. But these like
Gotcha.
magic lantern shows would also be accompanied by
Music.
words and music. Yeah, these were entertainment, but you got to think back. Like this is going back 200 years. Huygens actually was one of the people who first, I think, helped really refine the magic lantern. Huygens, as in like the Cassini-Huygens,
Okay.
probe that went over to Saturn, and Huygens, I think, was the one that dropped into Titan, maybe. But anyway,
I'm not familiar with that.
they would do these like intricate things where they have different slides and they pull them out, and they would change scenery, and they would like move the projector back and forth.
Right, it was, like,
There was
physical.
it was physical. They have smells and things like that. But back in the day,
Really? They
this
would
was
have
like,
smells?
yeah. They you can get like
Super
different
interactive,
smells,
huh?
and this is like a totally interactive thing. They would travel. There was a subsection that's called phantasmagoria, which would have been like horror things where they would
That I've heard
project
of.
ghosts
Yeah,
and
yeah,
stuff like that.
yeah,
But
yeah,
what's
yeah.
funny is my understanding is back then, 200 years ago, where people really didn't like this is us seeing like a goofy apparition projected is like kind of even funny, right? We dress up at this
Right.
as Halloween. Back then, at least like in like Europe and stuff like that, this was like terrifying to people apparently. Like
Oh,
they
of
would be scared
course.
because you're not supposed to represent like a demon. Now we
Right.
look at it as like we dress up as like we dress up our children like them. But back then, this
Right,
was like a
right.
serious thing, and so phantasmagoria was a thing, and eventually
Well, it's
that
like
got into
it's
like
kind of like if you heard this when one of the first movie theaters, like one of the first things that they showed in a movie theater was like a train coming out of the station. It's like one of the
yes,
first,
yeah.
and people in the movie theater would be scared
That's
because
what
they
they
thought the
say,
train was going to
yeah.
run into them.
They thought the
They tried-
rumors that
train
they
was-
ran out. Yeah, they
Yeah,
ran out
of
the theater.
fear.
They thought
So
yeah.
they thought the train was going to the theater. So I feel like it's like
Yeah.
we can't think about like how ridiculous that sounds. But if they don't have any, we have all these LEDs in
you've
front of
never
us, but if
seen
they don't have
anything.
any screen, they've never
Exactly.
seen anything like this. It's like all of a sudden it's like even a shadow puppet would be crazy to see because it's like something that you're like not
Yeah.
used to seeing, especially if it was
If you've never
detailed.
seen-
You
if you've
know,
never
like
seen electricity before,
Right.
and you see this thing glowing, like this would have been so magical.
yeah,
It's
yeah,
kind of magical now to see a projection glowing. When you
Totally.
take like a translucent, slide and see it on the screen.
yeah,
It glows in a really pretty way that like a digital projector doesn't.
totally. I
You
mean,
know.
just to bring it back to digital, but even like a projection mapping done well in the utilizing the structure and everything is like magic. People don't understand how many projectors how do you get a piece on each
yeah.
place? People don't understand that you
Yeah.
can just like cut it up. So it's like I feel like
Yeah.
there's, the magicians, like, the magicians always know what's going on, but the people watching the magic, it's like magic,
Yeah,
Um,
yeah. I mean, I like to say that what I do is I am not a light show, I'm a magician, and I'm both kinds. I'm the fake sleight of hand kind, and then I'm the real kind where it is actually magic, and you know what I
right.
mean. Like
Yeah.
there's secret sauce stuff that's kind of like you don't, yeah, there's kind of like you might think that I'm doing something very complicated behind the scenes. I might not be. It could be the opposite too. You
Right.
might think it's very simple, but it's very complicated. So that's the sleight of hand magician. But then there's the real kind where the experience and all
Mm.
that stuff is like has some sort of like a spiritual effect on somebody. That's kind of what
Yeah.
I'm trying to go for with what I do.
Well, I think it's definitely felt in your shows, and I think there's something interesting that you said there. First of all, you had such a New York accent there. You was like, "Yes, the sleight of hand magic, yeah, um, the secret sauce."
Secret
Um,
sauce.
so there's kind of an element there of the magic is actually science in some fascinating weird way. Like
Yeah.
there's gonna be a balance between the types of liquids that you put into, like, the solution, right? And then if you talk about like feedback, analog feedback is like a
Oh, I
very,
love it.
yeah, it's
I love that.
so
Yeah.
chaos, and it's like, but there's a science behind. There's actually something that's like a mechanism that's happening. So what is kind of like the way that you interface with this quote unquote science, and the kind of inherent uh, um, organized chaos that it brings.
I mean, I am, ultimately, I think about this a lot in terms of, my art. What am I actually trying to say, right? Some people might be like, political or awareness about things.
Mm.
Some people might be, expressing certain emotions or whatever. Some people might be trying to tell a story that somebody can relate to about,
Mm-hmm.
a hero's journey, right? But for me, what I really think that I'm trying to do is kind of like a mystical experience, kind of like, a reflection of some of the mystical experiences that I would have had, that I've experienced, trying to just basically give, uh, without sounding corny, like glory to God in a way. Like I'm trying to kind of,
Nice.
express that, like,
The beauty.
all right, so beauty, and also with music, music is a language that says things that aren't said through words.
Mm.
So music expresses things that you feel, and you do have emotions there, and all that, but you also can make people feel in ways, and these aren't things that you can express with words.
Mm-hmm.
Words are fantastic, but they do have limitations in a lot of ways, right? So I'm trying to express things in the same way that music is, trying to express that with visually and tying it in together as well, and trying to
Mm.
make, things like the way something like a piece of music might make me feel in terms of motion. What I'm trying to do when I'm performing is really, I'm trying to express I mean, first of all, I'm trying to stay within tempo, not like on the beat, but like a
Mm-hmm.
phrase. I want to make
Mm-hmm.
sure that when the music's changing, I change. So I'm going along with the music that way. And as a musician, it's kind of the benefit that I can anticipate, okay, a phrase changes, they're probably going to do a key change here or something. Visuals are forgiving because, unlike music, you don't really have to be like in the same key. You don't have to worry about actual
Right.
harmony.
Right.
And
Right. 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 Right.
there's a lot of stuff that is subject to interpretation, and your brain will
Mm.
fill in things like Dark Side of the Moon and Wizard of Oz, right? You do that with any movie, really,
Yes.
and it'll
Yes.
work. Like that, like these kind of, like when your brain sees visuals and sound together, there is a process where it automatically starts together, and then
Mm-hmm.
you can do that accidentally. But I do believe that, somebody who's a, more practiced or skilled can do this better than just an accident. But
Yeah.
there is because it's not music, it lacks certain parts of music. Um, it's a lot more, forgiving. But there is this experience, that is pretty important, is synesthesia,
Mm-hmm.
which some people experience naturally, which is like, when you like see sounds,
Yeah.
or
Of
you can
course.
like taste color. Some people have this actually. People on psychedelics experience this
Yeah.
sometimes. But there's people, but one of the things that I try to do in the tradition that I come from and some of my mentors have told me about is like, synesthesia, try to replicate that thing
Mm.
where it's not just the visuals, it's not just the music, it's something that when combined becomes greater than the sum of its parts.
Yes.
And that's really where I'm trying to go after when I do my performances, is try to create
Mm-hmm.
this experience. I like to front project. I like to also see the crowd. I like to
Mm-hmm.
be in the middle of it and feel the vibe of the room,
Of course.
because that alone is also another part of the experience and all of
Of course.
that. So trying to create this like thing that's bigger than the sum of its parts is kind of what I'm going after.
Yeah, I think you do that really well, and I think that's kind of like, synesthesia is just it's frequencies, right? It's like sound is a frequency, light is a frequency. When you combine
Yeah.
them and when you cross the streams, then you're now going to get something that's, like you said, bigger than the sum of all its parts. I really relate to that for sure. Um,
Yeah.
I want to also ask you kind of like, your this is kind of what I alluded to it before, but like, you're essentially doing real time, not essentially, you are literally doing real time generative art. It's just when we say real time generative, we're thinking about touch designer and programmatic and the word escapes me now, processing, like data into image. But you're doing that just in the analog world. Is there anything that like when you kind of relate to it, is there anything that you kind of like think to yourself like, oh, I'm like kind of being a little bit of a god in this kind of sense, like, because maybe God's not the right word, but like a creator, God's like a heavy word, but like, you're really, orchestrating this kind of thing that's going on, right? And I get this feeling. I feel like God all the time, obviously, but I get this feeling when I'm doing my visuals when when the generativeness that you're not really sure if it's going to work, right? Because it's like totally random noise or some feedback. You're not really sure, but when it does work and when you rein it in and it looks absolutely crazy and you're like, I never thought that it could look this crazy. You're kind of like riding this like lightning. You're riding this kind of like
Oh yeah.
like
Well, yeah. I mean, it goes back to the flow state thing. Like,
yeah.
I don't think that. I think that when you're at the best, you're no longer doing it. You're just a conduit.
Yes.
Like you're at that point a conduit for something. And anybody who's been in that flow state, whether it's like an artist, sports person, whatever, as a musician, I learned this when I first would start improvising, and you start getting to a good groove. Like, it doesn't feel like you're doing it anymore. You're not thinking about it, and then it
Mm-hmm.
just happens. And there's
Mm-hmm.
something that, and that's when it's working at the best. That's kind of why I think like I'm trying to express this mystical experience or
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
reflection of the beauty of the universe, because I am kind of superstitious, and I don't think at that point that it's me doing it. I mean, there might be,
Mm-hmm.
you can scientifically break it down and you're just feeling this, but to me it feels like
Something
I'm a
bigger.
conduit for it
Yeah.
at that point, and definitely at that point, because it's just magically happening.
Yeah, I definitely want to, after your set, get into like a little bit more of that. What does that actually mean? Like, some sort of collective consciousness or different types of words that we can use there. Before we get to your set, I just want to ask you kind of,
Okay.
the TV shows that you were on, and being
Oh
featured
yeah.
in Nature, what was that like, and also in general, like performing with such huge rock bands, going on tour and kind of being in this world of this kind of like, very interesting world. What was that like? Let's start with the TV shows. What were you doing on these shows? What was the
I mean,
thing there, and
some of
how do you even
the
get those gigs?
yeah, I mean, I kind of get gigs because I've got good SEO, I guess. I'm out there. It's not liquid light shows. It's not hard to find me.
Mm.
And this actually does get to the superstition part. I don't really know. I do think that there is some sort of. I'm not superstitious about a lot of things, but my worked out. At which point I'm like, a lot of it just seems so accidental, and like things being in the right place at the right time, and it's like,
Mm.
I mean, you could chalk it up to something, and fortune favors the bold. You're just out there a lot, and you fail a lot, but you increase your chances statistically of succeeding by doing stuff a lot.
Totally.
But being out there, like for instance, okay, so the coolest thing I did for a movie would have been the Electrical Life of Louis Wayne, starring like Benedict Cumberbatch and Claire Foy, and it's about this troubled artist, Louis Wayne, who drew these like psychedelic cats in England in the turn of the last century.
It's recent, no?
Yeah, it's on Amazon, and you look at these paintings now, and they look like they're in the 70s. I mean, the cat's got like big eyes. They have these like trails coming off of them. You're like, I can't believe this was done 100-something years ago. But they did a biofilm about him, and he had mental issues. And there's a point in his life where he has a mental breakdown. So what we did is I was hired to do the quote unquote trip scene, where basically his mind breaks and it's his visionary experience. And I did a lot of like video feedback of like his paintings and his cats and stuff coming through him, because he's one person before and he's another person after, unfortunately. So we represented this break, through that stuff. So that was really cool. I mean, it's like a full minute of screen time. One of the bigger paychecks awesome. I gotten at that time, was nice. Yeah, it's always nice, because sometimes you don't make money, sometimes you do, but the TV shows like The Offer was really cool, which was is the making of The Godfather. It was on Paramount Plus. Paramount put out The Godfather. So they did, for the anniversary of it, they did a one season thing about the making of The Godfather. It's crazy stories. The mafia was involved in it and everything. And they go to this psychedelic club, legendary club called the Electric Circus, which was in on St. Mark's Place, New York City, late 60s, early 70s. All these bands would have played there, like Hendrix, Sly the Family Stone, The Dead would play there. And then they had this huge. What was really cool about it was it had this massive Lycra immersion
screen.
Yeah, but it stretched across the whole thing. It had several projection stations in the balconies that would then project down.
That's wild.
And then have a stage. So we recreated that on a Hollywood set, and we recreated that as a stretch Lycra, because the scene took place in the club in like 1971 or something. So they hired me to do the visuals and stuff and consult about how this place actually looked. That was really cool. So, but that was really cool. But some of the gigs have been cool. Like I did like Madison Square Garden with the Allman Brothers, and it was like me. John Singer was there. I'm sure you know John Singer.
Of course, yeah.
So like he was there because it was the Allman Brothers 50th anniversary, and they always had a Liquid Light show going back. My good friend Chris Zamandermich was their touring light guy for 20-something years. He couldn't make it. Long story short, my other friend Marco, we got together and we did it, and that was dope. I mean, that was like riding a dragon. It was 20,000 people sold out. I do tend to blank out when I do my show, like I'm laser focused. So I'm just like laser focused on the show and just kind of like doing it because it's me and the I don't really pay attention to a lot what's going on sometimes. And then when that first set ended, the roar from 20,000 people was like, it caught me by surprise, because I kind of forgot for a minute, where I was, because I was so locked in the screen. The roar of people, I was like, holy shit. That was cool. Or some of the other bands, like working with like Nick Mason, I did a few shows with them. Super nervous, like my hands were trembling on my plates and stuff at first when I first did it, and I was like, oh shit, I can't believe I'm doing this with a member of Pink Floyd, and and I was like super. I met him a couple of times, and the first time I met him, I was like so nervous. I was like so starstruck, and I was like downstairs in the green room, and literally all I said to him was like, "Thank you for having me. Very nice to meet you. Thank you for." I didn't want to say anything because I was like, "All right, if I don't say much, I'm not going to embarrass myself." Yeah, when they came around again, the other times I was more comfortable with it because the shock had worn off.
Nice. Yeah, he has the Sarsa Full of Secrets, right? Is the tour that they do? I think. Nice.
Yep. Sarsa Full of Secrets, and what's his name? I forget the bass player. Guy Pratt is his bass player, who's on tour now with Gilmore, and he was Roger, quote unquote, after in the 80s and 90s when Roger Waters left. So he's basically a member of Pink Floyd too.
Yeah, like the second, the later albums, right? Like
yeah, that would have been him.
Post the Vision Bell, I think, right? It was
Hitchhiker's Guide, not Hitchhiker's Guide to Galaxy. The
no.
Pros and Cons of Hitchhiking is a Waters album. The
I think it's a
last
Waters
one, the
album.
Final Cut.
Final
The
cut.
Final
The final
Cut
cut.
was the last one, which is kind of a Waters album, and then it was Momentary Lapse of Reason, and then Division Bell,
Yeah.
and then that's where
Division-
Guy Pratt
right,
came
okay.
in.
Final cut. That's right.
Yeah, and
Nice.
90 Final Cut, Momentary Lapse 80s that had like Learning to Fly, and then Division Bell was 90s.
It's not really Pink Floyd.
Yeah, it's different, you know. It's more like David Gilmour, but I love all of it. I'm not going to talk
Yeah,
shit.
for sure. I don't want to get you in trouble. You know, like I can say that.
Yeah. I don't want to.
You love all of it. Steve loves all of it. He loves all of it. Book him.
Yeah.
Super cool. I mean, it's like, you know, it's such a. You must be blown away by like how it's taken you in so many different directions. Like, you know, obviously, you know, you got into it to kind of be a performer and be in this world, but then to get to be doing movies and being featured in Nature, I mean, it must blow you away, no?
Yeah, I feel very able to do very, very lucky that I've been able to do this in a wide sphere of stuff. So like I haven't toured like much, like really. Most of my stuff is one-offs. I've done short tours. You know, so one thing is like, unlike a regular visuals guy, I haven't done, or a person, you know, I haven't done like anything like that so much or whatever, or I might not have done as many shows as some other people, but I have done, I feel very blessed that I've done a huge variety of stuff. I mean, everything from like, you know, Madison Square Garden, right? That's dope. Stuff like that. But then even like little weird one-offs, like, especially when I was starting out, I was taking up anything. And I've done like the Harlem Police Athletic League. Police Athletic League's it has nothing to do with the police. It's a long story. It doesn't actually have anything to do with the police, but it's a community
Steve,
center.
Sure.
Yeah, right. I mean, the police.
You're gonna
commissioner
arrest
at the
me?
time
What's going on
would
here?
walk in. But anyway, like stuff like that with like little kids in Harlem for like a you know like a Halloween party, and I've done some
So
Christmas
cool.
parties for them, and I got the liquids there, and I'm letting the kids like drop stuff in. Like that to me is like cool because it's not the classic rock and roll thing that you would associate with this kind of artwork. You know, I've done some rappers and stuff, done like Master Ace. I didn't do liquids. I did like glitch video stuff for him. You know, but definitely feel lucky in terms of being able to do this with a lot of different stuff. You know, aerialists. You know, for like
Wow.
you know, I've done spoken word. I've done fucking comedy. You know, so there's like a comedian. She's doing stand-up comedy, and I'm projecting there. Like
That's
I
so cool.
love the fact that it's these weird little you know things. So yeah, that's something that and what's shown me it's told me a lot about the art. And you know, it's not just like stone hippies that like this kind of stuff. You know, it's quite universal, seeing color and motion and stuff. Everything from people from all kinds of backgrounds and little children. You know, I've had friends who are vets coming back from Iraq. We have a party for them, and I'm doing this like on a projection of a house, and he's like blown away by it. And I'm like, that's you know things that you don't normally associate with like a psychedelic light show, right?
Totally.
You know, so I feel very lucky. And if there's one of the things I feel lucky for is the breadth of different environments that I've been able to do this in, for sure.
Amazing. That's
Yeah.
amazing.
Yeah.
Wow. Well, super cool. I'd love to transition into the set portion.
All right, so you know what? Let me show you this first, right? This is just an overview of like my my general setup when I'm doing this live. So back in the day, you would do this with like over projectors, and a proper light show done back in the day wasn't just liquids. It would be like slide projectors. It would be film projectors on loops. It would be like refracted light off like pieces of mylar or polished metal, and it would be like a whole group of people as like a light show orchestra. You know, these days, and you can still definitely do that. But now for like the touring environment, and when I do my shows, this is what I'm working with. We got like Resolume, and everybody knows that. And I guess just like a quick thing about the Resolume, I use it a bit differently than most people probably do. For me, it's mostly a glorified clip player. And all of my stuff here, maybe at some point I can show you later on, I have all these different videos. Everything here is stuff that's analog that I've created myself. And it's some stuff that's not liquids. Like it might be like, for instance, slides, right? Like it's not just liquids. So let's go to this. So these are like 35 millimeter slides with that are with a Kodak carousel. These are actually 50-year-old slides, and they're fading between each other from two projectors. And in front
Wow.
of it, I have a color wheel, like a physical plexiglass disc that I made that's rotating with color. And then I have another one that's like a tulip. That's then, yeah, it's Nixon. These would have been like protest slides from the 60s. So this would have been like funny to see. All that stuff that you see there is actually like the light going through this piece of warped plastic that's spinning, that's
Wow.
then causing the light to move around. So I have
Crazy.
like a lot of stuff like this that is not quite practical to bring, out, but I have, yeah, there's Pink Floyd there, and
Sick.
so I have like a lot of stuff like this there. So that's just like, I guess, a thing about my Resolume is there's a lot of stuff in there. It's a glorified clip player, but it's like a lot of things that you can't really bring out, right? And then I have like my clips and stuff like that as well. Because like a light show back in the day would have been like a bunch of people working in tandem. I kind of like to work alone, just because of the way like my head works when I'm doing this. So I kind of, instead of having a team of people, I got all my artwork that I created and I'm mixing it in Resolute. But then I also have these two cameras. So let's go back to over here. I have these a pair of cameras here. Right? I got the HDV1, right, video mixer here, and I have these two cameras that are piping into it that just go into Resolume as a that are feeding in, right. They're being video captured, right, in HDMI going in, and that comes in as another clip. So I can do like a hybrid of like all the stuff that's other analog art that I created and mix it around. But then I also have the physical stuff here as well. So like in this case, I have these two. Actually, I think my battery died there. We'll move this around. Oh, no. All right. And so let's get. I'm going to move over to these cameras. So basically, you got these two cameras here. I have like these like rotating like light tables here. This is
Yeah,
stuff that
I
I sell in my
actually,
shop.
I was gonna say, totally forgot to mention that you have a whole shop, that you sell
Yeah.
amazing products at as well. I totally forgot to mention that at the get go, but yeah, I mean, we'll link it down below for
liquidlightshop.com.
sure, and
Yeah.
we'll talk about that as well.
Because
Sorry.
'cause I work in such a niche thing that like I have to supplement the income,
Of course.
in other ways other than just So the store is probably like that, video commissions and stuff, piecemeal it, and that's how I make my livings.
Nice.
So I have all this stuff as well that I sell. So, for instance, you have these like light tables and stuff like that. So let's go ahead, and I'm gonna I'll give like a basic demonstration of like the liquid show, right? Let me give you my feed here, and I'm just gonna pull down on just that one rotating light RGB turntable that you would on the right. I can zoom in. It's doing all these cool stuff with the colors. You can see my hand here. I can also then flip over. Nope, that's another. Or I can also flip over to this other plate, which I have over here. Let me get it in focus. And that's spinning. And this would be like a bunch of liquids that I'm mixing, that I'm squishing around.
Whoa.
Between plates of glass. So let me get that in focus. And I'll show this to you real quick, and I'll show you how this stuff's like made. So you see over here, I got a bunch of liquids like in between this stuff. And it's oil and water plus a little bit of isopropyl alcohol. And when you squeeze it, you have oil and water which don't mix together, and they're being squeezed between these plates.
Wow.
And the way it looks like on here is this.
Trippy.
And then so this is
just oil and water.
There's it's oil and water and isopropyl alcohol. And then on a scientific level, there's a whole like surface tension thing. The oils are breaking because of the relationship between the surface tension between the oil and the isopropyl alcohol and the water.
Gotcha.
And what's really
the alcohol
awesome,
is important. The alcohol is important, huh?
It is very important, actually. Yeah. So I used to, when I would teach this stuff, oil, it show you what it looks like with just oil and water. It's kind of blotchy, but when you add an isopropyl alcohol to it, it then starts breaking. It starts breaking to these really beautiful big lobes. At this point, I just use 71% isopropyl alcohol because it has 30% water, 29% water, and whatever. And what, you can see my hands here, and I can, zoom in on just the artwork, and kind of it's like a magic trick. You don't really know what it's doing,
Right, what's going on, yeah,
or how it's being done. But for demonstration, we'll pull it out. And this is kind of like, what I love about this is that you have like full control over, like you can really like dial in with the rhythm. Like I can bounce this around. This plate's a little pasty. We'll make a fresh one, but I can like move this stuff around, and I can move this like in rhythm with the music or whatever.
Yeah, it's like some crazy particle orb thing flying around. Super cool.
Yeah. Yeah. So I'll make a fresh plate. This plate's actually like, this is like 3 months old. It's still going. Yeah. I get lazy. I mean, I also sell glass, so I've had a bad habit where I'll take something out of stock, but I don't feel like cleaning it.
Gotcha.
And start like reusing new glass, and I'm like, I really need to stop doing that. I'm supposed to sell this stuff.
That's really.
But
funny.
We'll go back to this here, which is just right. It's just like a petri dish. And it's spinning on top of this. We're going to change this to white, so you can see it just being white. Let's get it to white. I think my battery might be dead. There we go. And we'll stop the rotation as well. So this is going to be just imagine here that I have a petri dish, I have a light table, and it's coming up to here. Mm-hmm. And so at its most basic, what you have, you do have oil and water, which do not mix. Mm-hmm. All right. And so I like to start off with this kind. This is called a blow plate. And we're going to move on to the squash plate. What I showed you before is a squash plate. There's a blow plate. So I'm going to grab some water and throw some water in. And now I have like H2O. A layer, H2O, and I got a layer of water on it. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take now some oil dye. Here's a cheap plug, liquidlightshop.com. Over. And what I'm going to do is just put a drop of it in. You can see it kind of like hangs out there. And what's happening is actually you have a layer of oil floating on top of water. I have maybe a couple of centimeters of water, and on top of it, because oil floats on top of water, you have this oil dye. This is pure oil dye. I don't have anything else added to it. This is pure oil dye that's now floating on top of it. And what I could do is I could take like a straw, and this will be called a blow plate. And so I can start blowing it around. Wow. Start creating like different
shapes,
different shapes and patterns and stuff. Let me maybe adjust my camera a bit. One of the things when you're dealing with like cameras is you now have like another layer of something that's translating it, so you want to make sure like your camera's correct, because this can also, you can see like now it sells a lot more. So it's kind of a pain in the ass, but at the same time you can get
you can make a lot of effects with it, right?
Yeah, totally. I can run this through effects, but basically what I have here is just a bunch of oil that's floating on top of water, and I can like move it around. Mm-hmm. So let me go ahead and I'll add another color to it. Let's see, maybe I'll add some red to it. And let's maybe open this up a little bit. And you can give it some time, but this is actually going to start expanding. So again, at a fundamental level, all this stuff has surface tension. Basically, any bubble, the reason why a bubble is because the outside of it has a surface tension. Even your skin has a surface tension. A rock has surface tension. Yeah. It's most easily seen, though, with, with something like this. But you can see how it's like, with liquids, totally, and so you can see that this is like kind of expanding. Let's blow this around a bit. So I can start getting like different swirly shapes and stuff in there. Let me drop another color in there. And I'm going to start building this plate up and adding like more stuff to it. I'll probably go a little faster.
Please.
Just because, I'm demoing. But
wow,
you can sit here like, if you're a patient, you can sit here. Yeah, and if you're a patient, you can sit here and these things will expand over time and whatever, and do really cool things. And I really like to maximize that when I'm doing the light show. I like to like let they're doing beautiful stuff too. You don't want to like get like too happy and agitated too much and make it want to do something. It's going to do it on its own. And
Hmm.
so what I would do for the show, I'm doing this for a demo. You can see it here. I just go like right in on it, and you can start like moving the stuff around, right? And then what I could do is I could
Liquid
start,
simulation, but real.
and now I can like blend it in with my other
Totally.
layer that's here. So this is like a basic composition, of stuff that I can do. I can add some like different keying effects to it, and whatever.
Blending modes.
Yeah, different blending modes. I mean, you can see how it like really pops now. Going back to just this, right? So that's like a real basic interaction of oil and water, right? The oil is floating on top of it. It's going to stay. It's a lot more viscous than water is. Like if you put like a food coloring in there, and we'll actually do it now. Let's put like food coloring or a water-based dye. The water-based dye, you'll see, is going to have a lot different of an effect. The water-based dye, we'll put in some. Yeah, let's put in some green. So a water-based dye, this is just like a water-based as opposed to oil. You drop it in, but you can see how it just like starts clouding up, right?
Wow.
And it blends in really quickly because it's just now the oil wasn't mixing in with the water, but that stuff is. So it starts creating this cloud, and you can like move it around, and it'll start like doing that, and it dissipates really quickly. It's cool, but working with the oil is a bit better. But now I had like clear. I had just water with oil on top of it, and that was just a raw oil dye. Now let's go ahead and I'm going to add in some baby oil. You can use mineral oil. Baby oil is a little better for this technique, and we'll see what this does. Because now you got the oil here that's not mixing in with anything other than kind of itself. But here we're going to put in a clear oil base.
Right? Oh wow! Now it gets
clear,
all fucking crazy.
And then and then a clear oil base. Like over here, you can see like this little shape here. Right. And you put in the clear oil base, and now it has something, now that oil has something that it can, that oil dye has something that they can interact with,
Wow.
That's I have these different like little things like here where I can start.
Whoa.
Yeah, so I can
just changing the light bulb. Yeah, wow, look at that. It's crazy.
Yeah, I can start changing the colors and start getting some interesting things on it as well. I can start doing like
crazy impressionist painting.
Yeah, so that's kind of like the basis of like how the oil and water interactions work. I did it kind of quickly for us here, but then let me just go back to white here for a second, and I can also start rotating it with my little machine here.
That in itself is going to start making something interesting, right?
Yeah, totally. And that alone is going to start creating like these like swirls and stuff like that. So it's a little dark. I mean, I kind of messed this one up, but I'm going kind of quick here.
No, I love it.
Let's see.
I do not notice anything being messed up.
Okay, good. Yeah, so, and we can just like let this one run here, and it's going to create this swirl. And so I can have this going like over here and maybe blow it around a bit. Nice. This is going to be going, and then I can like move it over to this. So now I have this like composition where I have two different things going.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then because I am using like technology, I do cheat it. So I'll start like I have my hue
rotation. Yeah.
Yeah, like typically in a traditional show you would have in an purely analog show you'd have a color wheel, something that's spinning with lighting shells in front of it. In this case, I'm doing this and I work alone, and honestly having this stuff really helps in terms of like just your flexibility in doing a show.
Of course.
So I'll start doing this, and right? And that alone is something that's quote unquote passable.
Yeah.
So we'll go over to let's go over to uh, let's go over to just the plate here, and I'll start off and I'll do another one of these, which is called a squash plate.
Okay.
So let me know if I'm going too long or anything like
Not
that.
at all.
Or
Not at all. You're doing
we're on
great.
time. All right, cool. Here we're gonna go and we're gonna start this off fresh. So we're gonna do here. And by the way, I mean, if people hold on a second, let me just put this somewhere. Just gotta find a place to put this actually. You know, by the way, I have, if you guys go to my YouTube, I have a bunch of tutorials about how this stuff is done. So, Liquid Light Lab YouTube, I have like a
We'll
whole
have it
bunch
all
of
linked
tutorials how
for
to do this
sure.
stuff. Yeah. So if people want to really like spend some time and check it out. So now what we're going to do here is clock faces. Back in the day, and these would have been taken from clocks. And then technically this would be a
really?
technique called a clock dome. The rumor is that this whole style of doing liquids like this started in San Francisco in the Bay Area. Rumor has it in the 60s, none of the classrooms had clock domes
They just
on
took
them.
all of them.
Because kids would take them, you know.
That's awesome.
I have these custom made. It's actually quite hard to find a good fit. You can find a dome piece of glass, but for them to fit together and to be able to like hold them and to be able to like control them,
Right.
that is the difficult part. So what I would just do is just buy them from clock manufacturers or whatever and sort through them until I found a good fit. Eventually
Really?
I found a fit that I liked, but you'd buy like you'd waste a lot of money buying a bunch of different pieces just to find that they don't fit together. So what I did eventually is I found a factory that would make them for me and gave them specs. And now I have like some different styles and fits together.
That's awesome.
You know, it's just, and I also sell them with like a padded case as well, because it's kind of a pain in the ass to transport this around. So I also give you a padded case when I sell it.
Nice.
It makes it a lot easier to transport. But anyway, clock dome. Technically, it's called a clock dome, but it's not called a clock face. I got yelled at in an antique clock store once for saying clock face. She's like, "It's a clock dome, and what do you want?" It was like an expensive clock store, and I was like, "All right." As we got. All right. So, but we will now go ahead and do a basic, what's called a squash plate. And again, the liquids that I'm going to show here are just kind of the ones that I do. There's a lot of other kinds as well. Some of them like boiled plates where you can like boil the liquids as well. I have those in my Resolume, and I'll show you.
Heat it up?
Yeah, totally. This would have been like a European style. Let's see if I can get this going on here. So this is actually now this is on a slide projector, and where it's vertical. And what it is, it's like you take the heat filter off and it starts boiling. This would have been, so in America, we kind of use what I'm showing you here with the clock faces, but over in Europe, they didn't have as many overhead projectors. The American Army actually used a lot of overhead projectors in World War II to do like battle plans and stuff. They over there didn't use them, and coincidentally, a lot of early psychedelic light show stuff in the '60s was Army surplus stuff in the San Francisco area that they had left over from the war. But this stuff here is like liquids that are actually boiling.
Crazy.
You know, and that's more of a European style, but you know, and there's several other ways to do liquids as well. But
I've seen. Have you ever seen the ferrofluids, like the metallic fluids?
Yeah, totally. Yeah, totally. And there's this dude, Cosmodernism. He does a lot of that stuff, and it's really cool. For me, it's a little harder to control that stuff to make like, because like this one I can like squeeze the stuff. Even blow plates are a bit tough, but really when you get down to the squeezing of the plates,
that's when
this
you can really control it.
I can 100% control it. You know, some stuff like you might see like bubbles. You know, it creates like a nice pretty film. And people send me these videos all the time, and they're cool, but they're difficult to really control as an expressive medium. For me, when it gets down to this, I think of this as like the acoustic guitar of visuals, because it's like you can really express yourself and move stuff right away and get decent dynamics out of it, as opposed to other things which are like cool, or they're like a one-trick pony and they kind of do one thing. And it's not this one-trick pony at all. But as far as actually using it as a performance medium, but that's just for me. I mean, there's so many times when I think I can't do something, I see somebody do it and they use it as a performance medium. I'm like, oh wow,
Yeah.
you can do that. There's so many times that I'm proven wrong. So I should say that. But anyway, so let's go ahead and I'll like squash plate, which is kind of like a classic look that a lot of people remember from the 1960s, right? Light shows had a lot of different elements, right? Slide projectors, film projectors, and all that stuff. But one of the really unique things was this liquid element of it. So I have my dish here, and I'll start off with just some mineral oil now. Before I was doing baby oil, here I'm going to do mineral oil. And you just get this stuff from like CVS or something like that, and it's actually a laxative. So if you want to weird people out, go buy mineral oil and rubber gloves at the same time, which I've done, and you get some super interesting looks from that.
That's funny.
So here and so now, as opposed to before where I had just the water with the oil on top, here I actually have just oil. So I'm going to take again some of the dye before, and you can see how it reacts a little differently than before. Now it's just kind of staying there because it's oil now that is mixing in with it.
Right.
I think. Yeah. So let me get some focus on that. Let's see, what am I doing with I'll also change the color a bit. Right. So now I can start like moving it around as well. And I'm going to build up to the plate. Even here, there's like a lot of stuff that you can just use this as a background. Like if you reverse the color on this, and add this into something, like this alone can start doing some pretty interesting things,
Super cool. Yeah.
We'll go kind of fast. So we'll, for the demo, but I mean, this alone, you can start getting some interesting things. And actually this kind of stuff looks dope with like feedback. Start adding like video feedback to it. You start getting these like different, actually, Anyway, so we'll now add in some isopropyl alcohol. And I think, so now we're going to add in some just isopropyl alcohol, which has 70% alcohol and 30%. You kind of want both.
Mm-hmm.
And we'll drop some of this stuff in.
Whoa.
All right, that's doing some interesting things. And let me add, and now I will add in, I think I want to add some magenta to this. Yeah. Let's see, we got the magenta. Orange, should we set the orange? Let's see. I think a red will look nice. Yeah, we'll put a magenta into it now. So now I'm going to add in just like a water-based dye. So I'm going to add in the water-based dye, and then we'll drop this into the isopropyl mix.
So it's like the opposite. You have like a oil-based
it's
water dye.
Yep. And you can do this in different orders. It doesn't necessarily have to be this one way.
Uh-huh.
People have interesting. You have interesting.
It's a lot of experimentation.
Communities. Yeah, a lot of experimentation. Nothing has to be one particular way. So, what I have here is just an open dish with, the liquids floating around in it. But what I'm going to do now is I'm going to grab this top piece and I'm going to squish it. So I put it on top of it, and now I start squishing it. Right? So I'm moving all this stuff around.
Wow.
And so now I'm starting to get like some pretty cool things. And that's like a basic squash plate. I add a little bit more isopropyl alcohol to this one. One of my friends, when he puts the alcohol in it, Stranger Liquids, they call it dosing it. I'm going to dose it with some, because alcohol evaporates.
Right.
You do want to keep putting it in there because it is going to evaporate on it.
Interesting.
So I'm going to add a little bit more, right? And now it's got like a super basic, squash plate. I can play around with this and I can add some more stuff in, but now I could I could bounce this if I want to the music.
Right.
I could spin it around. I can start adding all kinds of different things to it, right? Of course, I'm a big fan of the video feedback, so start adding that to it.
Whoa. Whoa, bro, whoa.
Yeah. Let's go back down. Let's get rid of this. So, and I can also now, if I want to, I got my plate and did a quick mix there. I can also then on the top layer add some more stuff in as well. So I have this open dish here. The liquids are only in between this. And I'm going to go ahead and add something at the top here. So I'm going to add some more. This is called like a hot spot, right? The liquids, when they're pressing together here, when the glass is pressing together here, it's pushing everything out. And this is a hot spot. Yeah, this is where the seal happens. The rest of it, there's still a couple of millimeters of the liquid thing in there. But right here is where it's really. So let's go ahead and cover that up because I don't think it looks great to do that. And we will go ahead and I'll put some yellow on top of that. All right, gonna let this kind of. So I can kind of let it, I'll mix it up kind of quicker. A lot of times, like I said, I like to just let stuff, like, as the oil is spreading, like that alone, you get mileage out of that.
Right, creates interesting, yeah.
Yeah, it creates interesting stuff.
Wow, I mean, this looks super cool, just like that. Just by squishing and letting it release, it's, like, really cool.
Yeah. And, like, the oil wants to, like, float out to the top and all of that, and that's your basic squash plate. You can mix it in with this other stuff too.
Super cool, dude. I don't know if you have this set up at all, but I saw you kind of show off like a video feedback, like analog video feedback.
I do.
You were creating some like reaction diffusion, like analog reaction diffusion.
Yeah, let me go ahead and move. I do have it set up. I have it right there. So here,
if that's possible, because reaction diffusion is obviously one of my favorite things, and the fact that you were doing it analog was so cool.
What do you mean by reaction diffusion?
It was kind of like you were subtracting and adding, and then it creates like squiggly lines, like very small squiggly lines.
Oh yeah.
So I mean, in computer graphics called reaction diffusion. I think it's actually in science. It's something that happens in nature as well. It's just like when you add and subtract, then you get this like very interesting kind of feedback pattern.
Yeah. Well, I'll show you my setup here, and I can also run it into the Resolume, and I'll show you how it works. But so what I have here, this is like a flat panel monitor. What this device is down here, this is
it a normal monitor, just like a CRT monitor?
No, it's like a flat panel LCD monitor that's still 4:3 aspect ratio. This is like one of these weird things that they start, like when they first started making LCDs,
right?
But they still were using 4:3 aspect ratio. And what's nice about this one is that it has the inputs on the side, so you can lay it flat. This particular device itself is called a visual presenter. It's when overhead projectors started getting connected to digital projectors, and you would take this isn't translucent, but you would take, actually you can put on an upper lamp here. Oh, wow. You're not seeing it. It's blown out, but basically if you're like in court or in class, you put your document down here, and then you can, show it on the projector or something like that. Right, so that's technically what this is for. This particular model was actually used at the OJ trial, which is where Chris Simonovich from Brotherhood of Light, they were watching the OJ trial and they saw this. And they're like, I think we can use that for liquids, and then they got the idea from that.
That's so funny.
So like you can bottom light it like the same way I'm bottom lighting this stuff. And this is a camera here. This particular unit, it's starting to become really rare. I'm not going to give away the model of it, but it also has E knobs and these various like things where you can let's see. It has various like functions where I can like zoom the camera in. See, like my hand's getting bigger over
Oh
there.
yeah, look at that.
I can pull it out. And so I used to use like liquids on, just on this. And then one day I put the panel underneath and started realizing, oh shoot, this does feedback. Let me shut this off. And so what I have here, I have the V4. It's old school. Now it's old school, but old school composite video mixer with some effects on it.
Yeah.
And so my this camera that I have here is running into the video mixer, and then the output of that is going two places. One's going out there, but the other TV's going here, and I'm placing it under the camera.
Right.
So I have this under the camera,
feedback,
and I start getting feedback. So it's like a tunneling effect. Let me go ahead and show this to you on the actual screen, so you see what the results look like. Let's see. All right, so I can start moving the camera head around, and I can start getting these like trails and stuff coming off of it. And I can change the color. I can start changing the different effects on it. I can start twisting this thing around. But one thing that I really like to do is let me see if I can just get a nice little pattern going on here. All right, so you start getting different patterns and stuff here, but this also has a positive and negative button on it, which the video mixer has it too. But this is really when it starts shining. Is you add a positive and negative effect on it, and so every time this is going through, it's negating itself. So you can see it's like the reverse color of it. Every time it goes through it, it's positive, negative, positive, negative. So you start getting these like really wild stripes.
Yeah, it's reaction diffusion. It's literally analog reaction diffusion. It's crazy.
Yeah, I mean, I can get really esoteric about how I believe that like video feed or feedback in general, like the universe is a hyperdimensional fractal. It's a hyperdimensional feedback loop. Like I truly believe that on some higher level thing that the universe works like a fractal is the end of the equation goes back into the input. The output goes back into the input. Same thing here. The output is going back into this. Anytime you do that with a natural thing, when you take the output and put it back into the input, it's going to then get modulated by the thing in the middle. And every time that thing modulated, it's going to come back in slightly different. It's going to come back out slightly different, come back in. And now it'll start, like the human race, right? People come out and then they make each other. It's a feedback loop. Your body has a feedback loop in terms of how it regulates its temperature. This is like everywhere in nature. So, depending on what's in between it, you can start, getting all these weird things. And then I could also start adding in like with the V4, I can start adding in some like a mirroring effect, and you start getting these like mandala like patterns and, really crazy things there as well.
Whoa.
So
and this feature of the add and subtract is whoa, that was crazy. Is from the overhead light projector thing, or it's from the mixer?
No, the video mixer's not doing much at all. And in this case, it's just doing the splitting, right? So naturally, if I take the camera, if I was to take like, just hold on a second. I don't think I can do it here, but if I take this camera and aim it at this, it's going to do a similar thing. It's going to create this like tunneling trail effect,
feedback,
right?
For sure.
Yep. And so it happens
the add and
here,
subtract
but
part of it.
Yeah, so the positive and negative. That's really where this thing gets. Yeah, once you add a positive and negative.
That's a feature of that machine.
It is in this one, but this also has a positive and negative on it as well. I mean, any video, like it doesn't necessarily. Yeah, I use it here because it's a little bit easier. And I can also like start strobing it as well, and
nice
if I want to. And this particular model is really nice because there's a lot of tactile things. I have physical RGB here I can control. I can play it like an instrument. But anything, I mean, you don't necessarily have to have that. This has like a positive and negative on it as well.
It does, huh? I didn't know that. Interesting.
So take like your positive and negative on Resolume. We take like Resolume feedback or something.
Yeah, for sure. I'd say that's the reaction diffusion is really just that. It's just the adding and subtracting of something. But seeing it in an analog way is a very interesting. I've never seen it like that before.
And then this is using the positive and negative effect. I think it works. You get some nice stuff without the positive and negative, but I mean, obviously, this is a lot more dynamic when you start adding the stripes to it. And all that
Yeah, I
stuff.
mean it's cool as fuck.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, I think because of my esoteric beliefs on this, along with the liquids, I tend to employ a lot of video feedback in my light show because of just how I kind of, how much I believe in the power of feedback and how I think that the universe works like this.
Yeah.
And it's
Well,
and it'll mesmerize you too. It'll trip you out if you stare at it too long.
I'm already kind of tripping out. Wow. I mean, this is super wild. I really, it was fascinating to see kind of your process from beginning to end. And, obviously I know you probably went through it very fast, not what you're used to going through it. But,
Yeah, I definitely went through a little fast just to, yeah.
yeah. But I mean, it's just, just seeing how passionate you are about it, how knowledgeable you are about it is just so, it's what's it called? Infectious. It's infectious. I feel like I want to go to your website and buy myself a starter kit and start playing around with it at home. It just looks so much fun. Yeah, please just, first, thank you so much for showing us all that. And now as we shift into kind of the second portion, I'd love to talk a little bit about kind of like the education aspect of what you do.
Yeah.
And kind of the passing the torch along to the next generation, and kind of like what that means to you and how that meets you.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of it was just like I just couldn't believe how many people were coming up to me and being like, "Oh, did you invent this?" And it's like, "No, I didn't." And a lot of it is I'm nerdy. I like to get into things, right? I get hyper focused and really into shit. So it became this whole avenue, this whole world that I can devour all this knowledge. And there wasn't a lot of knowledge out there. There's a few books about it. I'm by far not the only one. It's definitely an underrepresented art. So I looked at that and was like, oh, so my own liking to do this, but then also just wanting to put it out there. I have a Tumblr. Nobody uses Tumblr anymore, but I had a Tumblr blog that had I think I collected 90 different of what I thought was the best resources online, everything from videos to artist interviews to this and that. It's old now. Half the links don't work, but I cut them up across 12 categories, light shows and movies, light shows and rock and roll, books about light shows, articles and stones. I started and I compiled this and I just kind of got into it. And, because there's this long, rich history, I think other than just myself really liking it, part of the mission is to bring awareness to it, and it benefits everybody. People understand more about what I do when they know that this comes from a whole tradition, right? I think it informs my artwork a lot more. One of the trouble I think we all have as visual artists, any kind of type of visuals that you're doing, one of the troubles that we all face is that people don't quite understand what we're doing, and they don't understand that it's an art. Me and you do, but a lot of people might quite not always get it. They might,
right.
So part of it is I'm trying to help people understand that this is also an art form, and it's not just somebody in production, running a robot or something, whatever from they don't even know what front of house is, but they don't know that it's just, you know what I mean? They can actually understand, oh wow, these are real people getting creative, and there's all different kinds of people doing this. So that is something that is part of my mission, is I wanted to people to really understand that this is an art form. Visuals have a lot of times, the psychedelic light shows had certain problems back in the day. They tend to get overshadowed. A lot of times these days, you don't even know who the visuals artist is, right? We don't get billing or anything like that. Right. So there's these kind of challenges and stuff like that. I also, one thing I really encounter a lot is, because it's kind of natural to start wanting to make things move and paint in real life, whatever. I see a lot of reinventing of the wheel.
Right.
I saw it a lot in liquid light shows, and I thought that if we start, people, I mean, there's so many times when somebody comes up to me, for instance, with my liquid show, have you tried putting this in there? Or they might be sitting there and you're like, yeah, I mean, and everybody thinks that they have this great idea where they're like, oh, have you tried putting this in? Have you tried soap? Have you tried this? And first of all, I'm like, yes, I did. It doesn't work great. But also, I don't want people wasting time. I want to see the art form rather than people, because it's very underrepresented as an art, and a lot of people know about it. They'll start doing these things right away. They might try to, like, they might waste time trying experiments that don't really work, and that's fine. There's nothing wrong with doing the experiments either. But
Right.
I guess I'm
But
just
it's like
trying
if you
to
know it's you can kind of direct people
yeah,
and
it's like
to not waste as much time. I think that's smart.
yeah, I want to see people kind of like then take whatever they've seen from me, and then build on their own thing. There's so many times I've
Right.
seen somebody who started off and they kind of flat out copying what I do, but then I see them a year later and I'm like, wow, that's really cool what you're doing there. You put your own twist on this, and it's now propelling the art. It's evolving the art form. So by kind of giving these people these basic, what I teach and what I give away, it's very basic stuff. What I want to see is the next level and stuff, and it benefits everybody. I want the people before me, these are human beings behind it, that did this stuff, put their passion and their souls and time and blood, sweat, and tears into it. I don't want those people to go away and be forgotten. Me, myself, right? Obviously, I don't want to, well, all can be forgotten, but me, myself, too, I want people to kind of get, okay, he did this, and then the next people, because it all pays itself back. You know what I
Right.
mean? Like the next people hopefully will evolve this and take it to some other level that even the old people didn't do back in the 60s. And then you'll look at this 50 years from now, you'll be like, new technology is going to be out there you can melt this stuff
Yeah.
with. You'll see that stuff too.
Yeah.
So that's kind of the core of the mission, and there was a lot of secrecy with light shows, especially in the
There was?
1960s. Yes, there was a very, very much so, a lot of secrecy, in part because it actually started blowing up, like in terms of becoming oversaturated. And so people were starting to get keeping it close. They were keeping their like different things close to each other because they didn't want somebody else going out there and doing it.
Right.
And even when I kind of started, some of the older people or some people here and there were not really great about trying to tell you things. Some people were all about it, some weren't. And because that was like an old tradition, like, oh, we have this thing, it's a secret knowledge. But I did not think that was doing any benefit, considering it's close to being a dying art. You might as well, and Joshua White, like a Joshua Light Show, good friend of mine and mentor to me, he's like, there are no secrets. There are no secrets. And I can show you how to do this stuff all day. And there's only one Steve Pavlovsky and one Liquid Light Lab. You'll never be, you'll be yourself, but you're never going to be like me. And that's where real art is. It's where the artist puts their imprint on it. It's no longer a copy, or it's not a mimicking thing. It's not just psychedelic wallpaper. There's like there's some soul behind it.
Yeah, not only that, I mean, the more you impart wisdom, the more you teach wisdom, the more your wisdom is valued. The more you pass on knowledge and impart knowledge, the more you're empowering that knowledge and putting it and giving it power. So I also, it's interesting because like really in the visuals world, at least in the motion graphics / digital visuals world, it's a lot of sharing. It's a lot of here's how you do this, here's how you do this, this is the program I use, this is the thing I use. And like it's kind of like the ethos. It's like a little bit of like the geek culture of like the computer world of like here's my code, here's my side app or whatever. And the benefit of that is that the industry and the community just grows exponentially because people are then interested. And then like you said, like even if somebody copies what I'm doing, they're not me. So I'm going to reinvent myself because I'm not copying somebody. I'm doing my own thing. My thing is going to evolve, and either their thing will evolve, which is great, or it will just stay the same thing as what I used to do. And then it's like, well, good for you. So it's like, it's a win-win situation, I think, when you teach people and show people how to do things. It also teaches you to do new things and see new things, So I think it's really, you hit the nail on the head with that kind of like idea.
I mean, it's like love. No, go ahead.
No, please. You were about to say something extremely hippie. Go, please. I love it.
Oh, Well, it's like love, you know, like when you love something and hold on to it, it's going to disappear on you when you try to hold on to love. But when you give love back, it comes back to you exponentially. You know, when you're giving love out, love is going to come back to you exponentially when you give it away. If you're trying to like just hold on to something, it's gonna go away. It's gonna slip through your hands. So it's like giving out knowledge is a similar thing. And you try to hold on to it, you can hold on to this stuff. And part of the reason I can talk about it is I got all these ideas in my head. I don't want to just die with like never telling anybody about this. You know, I want somebody to be like, oh yeah, and then hopefully they'll keep going. You know what I mean? And it's the same thing. And then it's you know, it's I was definitely nervous at first, kind of because there is kind of a tradition of secrecy about this, you know, kind of being like one of the people out there, like telling you how to do it. But, you know, I mean, open source, when I was to do this, you know, open source was a word that was used a lot. You know, it was kind of like a buzzword. And I was like, well, everything else is open source. You know, Wikipedia was just kind of becoming big. Why shouldn't this be? It's too, you know, it's the future now. This is how things work. You know,
get a lot of
and it's
pushback?
just, not surprisingly, no. I thought that I would. There are people in the community who don't like it, but it's too bad.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, there's people here and there. There's people here and there. Like any community, when you get enough humans, you get a spectrum of them, right? So we got our dramas. You know, we got our dramas and we got our clowns, and I can tell you stories, and you can go on some of the groups and see some of the things that people said. I'm not going to get into it here, but there's, you know, humans are humans. So you usually try to hold on to their knowledge, and they think that they have something special, but it's like, you saw how quickly I just did that. And I didn't use many ingredients at all. It's not rocket science. It's not rocket science, you know, but the way that I'm like mixing it and performing it, that's really what I want people to see. I want people to be like, oh, I see a Liquid Light Lab show. It's going to take you through places. That's kind of what I would hope that people would see. And get out of me, not just like, oh wow, there's a cool process this guy's doing. You know, that's anybody can do that. You know, yeah.
Super cool. You mentioned superstition, and we kind of touched on the collective consciousness and kind of like that your ideas are not your own, or maybe they are, but they're coming from somewhere else. Are we like in alien land, or are we in like you know, sort of multi-dimensional quantum theory land? Like, what are we?
Yeah, multi-dimensional, you know, definitely. We got like 5 senses plus your mind, and that's the only real way that we filter the world through ourselves. Some animals have other senses. You know, some animals' minds are, you know, maybe they see things differently than I do. So I think that because we have this filter of this body, I definitely believe in, like, you know, interconnectedness of things, and there's stuff that we just literally can't understand. We're not ready for it. You know, the DMT experience is kind of one of the closest ways you can kind of get to seeing that, like, you know, that type of a realm, I think. You know,
alternate
or whatever
dimension that's around us always, but never seen.
And I don't take, like, you know, for instance, the DMT or the you know, these entities that people talk about. I've never met an entity, honestly. I mean, I think that anything that has felt like an entity, I've definitely felt like truly a presence of something. It might have been myself, and I was just so disconnected from myself that I felt myself, and I felt like I was the god in this realm. I don't really know, because I think that we tend to put our filters on these things. I take that kind of stuff with a grain of salt, but I'm not against it. You know, I'm not against people thinking that maybe this is a tool to communicate with something else.
Well, I mean, there is something else. Is it an entity? Is it an alien? Is it God? Is it whatever? Who knows? It could also, just like you said, it could just be like a feedback. It could literally just be yourself feedbacking through different quantum realms and different dimensions. But yeah, I feel like the time spent of thinking about what it is exactly is, like, for me, it's a little bit of a waste. I think there are a lot of people that are way smarter than me that can spend time thinking about that and coming up with ways to prove what it is and isn't. But for me, it's like, it's a feeling, right? Like, you go into DMT world and it's a feeling, and it's like, it's not even, for me, it's not even like the feeling that I'm there. It's the feeling when I come back to reality of, like, the appreciation of how beautiful our reality is. You know, I do a lot of, or I try to do a lot of ceremonies and, like, you know, plant medicines and kind of this kind of lineage and kind of the way that they express psychedelic experiences is really like in a very basic way, is just like, this is nature, and nature is offering you a way to connect with it on a higher dimension, in a higher way, in a closer way. And what is nature? Nature is love. Nature is God. Nature is the universe, right? It's all these kind of same words that we use for the same thing. And I think the real lesson is like, you're the God, right? Not I'm the God because I'm all powerful, omnipotent, but like, I'm the God because I am love, because I am nature, because I'm part of the same thing, right? And I think that that's kind of like the bigger lesson of things. And to bring it back to kind of like what we're talking about, and kind of like the art that you're doing and that we're doing is, we're offering people in some way, and this is not like a pretentious thing, it's just kind of like more of an esoteric kind of view of it, but we're offering people in a way a little bit of a view into that kind of realm, right? Whether it's by being a conduit, or whether it's by, in your sense, using actual physics and nature to create something that's going to resonate on a higher power, using colors, using light. And then when you infuse it with like the frequency of music, right? We know a lot about 432 megahertz and different types of frequencies that can do different things, and sound healing. This is stuff that's like, very heavily researched, and there's a lot of information about it. Those things can actually make the world a better place. Those things can actually heal people and create a better world. So, I mean, you obviously are aware of that, and kind of like do that as well in your shows. And I think it's really awesome that you get to do it in such a physical way.
Nature is my biggest inspiration, honestly. That's my inspiration. There's so much wonder and stuff in it. Like there was a point in time I was really nerdy about science and space. Spent like 10 years being like super nerdy about space and stuff, and knew everything like about it at one point. I mean, whatever you can get off the internet, at least, and, not like real science. But yeah, I mean, it's an inspiration, and I do think getting in touch with that is important, like an Aya ceremony, or these psychedelic ceremonies. Like being older, like the wow factor. Like I don't feel I learn anything new from it. It's a cleansing of just myself at this point. It's a resetting of myself. I'm not 20 something years old where I'm like, oh my God, I saw this thing and I think, I'm kind of like, it's a cleansing, it's a reset, and go back to regular life, because really right now this waking reality is the real one that matters. And you got to deal with it. It's the wise deal, but getting in touch with nature and all that is super important. And we lose a lot of it, and especially in our crazy world that we live in.
Totally. Do you look at light and color as a sort of healing mechanism? Do you view it in some way as something that can, create change in the world? Maybe not like directly, but in some way.
I don't know. Not directly. I would think maybe playing around with it would, because then the person that's like playing around with it and being the artist gets like a certain a good sense of maybe self-esteem, or they make other people happy, and they get a connection to other people. Light itself, I don't know. I mean, maybe, I like sound baths and stuff like that, and definitely, I do think it's pretty cool. And yeah, it's definitely do believe in a therapeutic stuff. There is actually a lot of stuff with this stuff with like the liquids for children who are on the spectrum and autistic. There's actually this other kind of liquid light show. There'll be these projectors that have these rotating wheels inside. They have liquids and they're automated. They started off in England, Optokinetics. They were being used for light shows and discos, but there was a secondary market that was found in the 80s where looking at these like lava lampy things projected calmed a lot of people down, a lot of kids. So there's these sensory rooms that kids who are on the spectrum go to, and they feel calm because they actually see these like, slow moving shapes. So nice. In terms of that, and people who are sensitive, that stuff is cool. I mean, so in terms of that stuff, sure, there's healing elements there for sure.
That's cool. That's really nice. Yeah, I mean, like there's, I kind of look at it in two ways. I also feel like there's not enough information about like or like sound healing and sound baths, I've experienced them to the level that I'm like, okay, this is something that's super potent in my reality, and like I really believe that it's something that can really do stuff. But then I think about like light, like the sun is light. The sun is like the biggest healing factor in the universe, right? It can kill diseases and, you know, give you regeneration and everything. And then I think about color and like the way that color can elicit emotion and elicit like a visceral response, right? Like different colors can create a different response. And then I think about like, you know, sacred geometry, and I don't say sacred geometry in the way to like, you know, be woke. It's like a real thing in terms of like, you know, how the universe creates patterns and like the fractal nature of everything. That's like that's what sacred geometry is. It's sacred geometry is actually like a coined term from architecture, like back in, you know, the 1200s. It's like nothing to do with what it is today, but it's something that's like, yeah, it's definitely used today to express like sacred symbols, you know, and like, you know, symbols that we would attribute with like, you know, Kabbalah or like, you know, maybe even like, you know, occultism or something like that. But really it's from like architecture, like building churches and the way that they are like structured in a very you know, symmetrical and kind of like structured way, and because that they're done in this certain way, they're going to elicit a certain response, you know, and that was kind of like it's connected to obviously the way that in the Bible that they explain the way the temple's built and the way that you know, different pyramids are built and things back in the day. But yeah, it's a relatively new term that obviously is a great term because it's just like sacred geometry. You can't get better than that.
Oh yeah.
But you know, I feel like there's a lot of things there that can really create some sort of... So my point of saying this is that like there's so many things out there that are used as tools of change and healing, and like we're playing with that shit all the time and we don't even notice. Like maybe there is something in like, okay, if I put on, especially in music, right, when we're like playing at a concert and like people are on drugs, people are tripping out, people are like being taken on a journey, you know, and if you go even deeper, like what is the dance floor? Dance floor is like a field, is like an energy field, it's like a torus field. It's like it's its own temporary autonomous zone that's like just completely autonomous and doing its own thing. Like, you know, if you push into it the intention of like, okay, maybe what I'm doing is actually going to heal somebody, trigger something, create something, then I feel like we can do that, you know, and super esoterically, I don't think that there's any like empirical evidence of anything that I'm saying or any way to prove it, but it's like more of just like the intention in it. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Intention's important, you know, and intention's super important. You know, definitely. You know, one thing about concerts I think of too, it's like it's not much. It's a ritual, right? It's not fundamentally that much different than people dancing around the fire. Or a religious ritual, and also, you know, concerts, and people can also co-opt this for, let's say, like politics or whatever. You got a big rally and people get all hyped, crazy. It's a similar mechanism that works on people. You know, I think that because we just, you know, there's just something about us like congregating with people and doing something and having something go on and stuff. And you know, it's like a big feeling, like you know, when you have a lot of people at once experiencing something that's really important, like you know, Fish, or like when I've been to like big EDM shows or whatever. I mean, that energy of like the build up and release, right? That when there's like a drop or when there's like a crescendo or something, everybody at the same time just fucking, you know, there's something really special to that, you know, like
totally.
Yeah, it's like a religious catharsis. It's a catharsis of sorts.
It totally is. I just realized something. I'm so embarrassed. We met at
Submersion, right?
Submersion. We met at Submersion. I like just looked at your face for a second. I'm like, wait a second. I've kind of blocked that whole experience out because it was on October 7th, and it was like a very dark period in my life. And like I heard all the news while I was there, and I had a really bad VJ set. Not that that's like the worst thing that could happen on that day, but like it affected me in a very negative way. So I kind of suppressed a lot of those experiences. But I remember meeting you there. Just clicked to me. Sorry, I'm sorry I didn't.
No, that's fine. Yeah. Yeah, it was cool. That
Yeah,
was a
because
cool weekend. I mean,
that was
yeah, I mean,
great.
the
I really
festival's
enjoyed
cool,
that
but
one.
yeah, obviously, the weekend. Yeah, I mean, we got out like, I wasn't in touch with the news or anything, and then my friend, we like went to get like, to the fucking gas station and look at the news. I'm like, the world just end,
Yeah.
like the World War III just start, and it's like,
Oh
holy
my
shit, we
God.
were in this beautiful place.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, it was one of the weirdest weekends that I have ever experienced. And I've gone into it a bunch. I don't really want to talk about it. I just clicked to me that
yeah.
we've met in person before. Sorry, totally
It's a
random.
cool festival. I mean,
I loved it. I
I did
loved it.
sets with yeah. Who did I do? I did sets with what's his name? Eamon Andrews. What's his name?
A music artist.
Yeah, music artist. Like the fuck. I'm drawing a blank here. I'm sorry.
So
Uh,
many. It's
Luke Vibert. Yeah, so I did
okay.
Luke Vibert, which is really
Okay,
cool. Yeah,
that's cool.
Wagon Christ. He did a Wagon Christ set, and then he did this like crazy like other set where he's doing like the Amen breakbeat and just going nuts on it, and it was fucking amazing.
Nice,
Just yeah, it
nice,
was really
nice.
really
Yeah.
cool seeing that. And it was going so
Shout
hard
out
with it.
to Tyler for putting that all together and
Yeah,
getting us
yeah,
all invited there. Um, so yeah, kind of to end things here or to get to like the end of it. There's two things that I have written down here. I don't know which one's more interesting, but um, we kind of spoke a little bit about spirituality and like kind of like how that meets you and stuff. And I feel like we've spoken about that. What do you like? Because on your website and also you've spoken about it a few times about time and what that kind of like, what that, how you view time. So how is
yeah.
time relevant to LLL? And, what do you think the effects of time have on your art?
Yeah, I mean, so the light show moves through time, right?
Mm.
It's this motion, but it is plus time. I have a really weird relationship to time. First of all, I was born a full month late. I was born after
Oh,
10
wow.
months, and I have been literally late ever since I've been anywhere. And the thing is, though,
That's
but
so
I
great.
mean, it's true. It's unfortunate with other people. It's a big problem for me. So I have like
Okay.
ADHD and like other kind of things where I got chrono blindness. I have a difficult time literally understanding how long something takes. Like I can remember and be like, all right,
Mm.
that took an hour, but this is actually a problem. Like I hate it. It's like a demon in my life
Mm.
is time because I just don't quite understand. It's just like a thing that with the way my brain is, ended up. It's like and I've tried it. It just doesn't go away, and it's a daily thing that I try to deal with time.
Mm.
It's
Interesting.
I mean, yeah, yeah. So it's like it's funny, but at the same time, I mean, ask my partner. She'll tell you, man. And but it's unfortunate to for people who have to deal with it. I don't mean anything by it. I just don't
Yeah.
quite understand sometimes. That something's taking. Like I'll be like, I'll leave in 5 minutes, and like an hour goes by. I have to
Yeah.
work for myself.
Yeah.
I have to get this stuff done with the store. I have to do this. I ADD out. I click on one little thing, or I just say, okay, you know what? I'm going to do this little project really quickly.
Mm.
Hours go by, and like daily, I am sitting there. It's 2 o'clock in the afternoon. I didn't get any friggin' packages out or doing anything. It's just,
Right.
I have to laugh at it, but it's got
Yeah.
its
I mean, what else
problems.
can you do besides laughing at it? I mean, that's first of all,
Yeah,
I feel like did you call it chrono blindness?
yeah, or time blindness. Yeah,
Is
yeah,
that is
time.
that
It's
a
like
is
a
that
real.
like a
It's a real
okay?
thing.
So I think I have
It's
the
a real
same
thing. Yeah,
thing,
people.
and I'm
You
going to
might.
use well, I definitely have it, and I'm going to use it now anytime somebody tells me like, I remember
This
this
is
is
like
crazy
this is a study. Look up ADHD things, and I believe ADHD. I'm not saying
is tied to it.
whatever you got.
Yeah,
Well,
yeah.
I from what I have understood is that it is the only psychological thing that has time blindness in it. Other types of things don't have time blindness, but ADHD has it. But again, they're always,
Interesting.
I take this stuff with a grain of salt. They're always
No, of
coming up
course.
with
I
new
think it's
theories
like you
and
said, like,
rearranging the things.
yeah, of course. Especially psychology,
Like,
it's kind of bullshit.
it's
But
evolving a lot. And
yeah,
so there's a lot of.
I'm being reminded of when I was younger, and like my mother would get so upset at me for being late, and she would be like, a classic Jewish mother. She'd, full of guilt, like, oh, you don't love me, you're not on time. Like, why don't you respect my time? Why don't you? And like, you don't let, and I like hit me. I'm like, wait, Mom, I love you so much. I just don't understand time the same way that everybody else does. And it's not like I'm trying to hurt you or make you late for something. It's just like I just don't. And it's not because I don't value your time. It's just because I don't look at time the same way. Like you said, like you get stuck in something, or like you say, like 5 minutes. Yeah, 5 minutes, an hour. So now that there's a name for it, I'm so happy to learn that.
And it could be like, it could be measured. Apparently, like people who have time blindness, they can. All right, so you ask somebody, how long did this take? They'll be off, but they'll be relatively okay. It took an hour. It might have been 15 minutes, but 45 minutes. But they'll be, when they remember it. But apparently, at least this is the last thing that I heard, because I am interested in these kind of things and the psychology of it. But the last thing I heard is, though, that the person with time blindness, though, when they anticipate how long something will go, they're really bad at doing it. So they can understand how long something took, not as good as a regular person, but
to understand
when it comes to being, and this is something. I mean, it's a big devil on my shoulders. I deal with.
Yeah, I totally understand. And as I got older, obviously, then it became even more of a problem, especially when it comes to like, being in the real world and like corporate world or like whatever, like working world. You have to be on time for things. I like.
Yep.
Somehow I think I've compartmentalized it in my mind of like, if a client needs me to do something at a certain time, then like that's something that I can't fuck around with. And like I'll either put like alarm, like 3 alarm clocks on, or I'll make my meeting in my schedule like half an hour earlier, so like I'm conscious of it. But like anything personal, like my wife or friends or whatever, they might be waiting for me for a while, and it's like it's something that is really difficult to break, because it's like, it's not like that you want to hurt the person or like, that you want to make them late or something. It's just like you said, it's like there's something about like time not being like, almost not being linear. Like it's almost like I'm going to work on this thing, and I'm not going to finish at like 6 in the morning. I'm just going to like be here doing the thing. And like time's passing, but like time's not passing for me. You know what I mean? Like it's like it's a weird.
It doesn't even feel. It doesn't even feel like it passes. That's the thing.
No,
like
no,
I
it
go
feels
into
like it's
this
just
like thing where it's just, you're just existing.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, there's nothing you can do about it. I've been in a lot of, I always used to get in trouble in school and as an adult, and and jobs. My last jobs, I'd always be late to thing, and it's like, they didn't break me back then. They're not going to break me now. Like, just, I try to tell people, like, you don't understand, like, the amount of trouble I've been in, I should have learned, but, but it just doesn't. It's just not, you can't see it, but it's a real thing that exists.
Are there are there any things that you do to curb it in some ways? Like, are there any,
I meditate. I wake up and I get some water, and I read that 18 minutes is a good thing for ADHD. So I'm trying to, I'm doing that. But when I remember to do it, I try to remember to take breaks and not stress myself out and give myself some breath. But that's not always possible. Sometimes the situation dictates that you just got to be on, and you're going to have to like, and then the situation, so when I have the option to do it, I try to just keep stuff at bay a little bit and try to be cognizant of it. But it's a constant learning of how to deal with this, and it's a process. It's a process.
Fascinating. I obviously I don't mean to laugh at your problem. I think it's
I laugh at it. It's totally fine, man. I think that's the best thing you can do when you got a problem, is to just laugh at it.
For sure. But I do see that it is difficult for you. Interesting. So so time is like a real thing for you. So maybe in kind of like in a cherry on top situation for the end here, like when you're in your shows, when you're performing and time doesn't exist, is that like the time that you can connect the most to your essence and your being?
In some ways, definitely. Yeah. Yeah, definitely in some ways, because everything just melts away and I'm fully locked in. The system behind me, I know exactly where everything is. I know the music. I'm anticipating it. It's that flow state where everything else, goes away. Absolutely. Absolutely. That is a situation, other things do it too, but for sure, the light show, yeah, it's just like, I mean, I have to like look at shows back and I'm like, oh, wow, that happened. Like, I'm not really even cognizant of it. I don't know if maybe other people do that too, but I look at the replay and I'm like, oh, wow. Or even like, so one thing that I do is like, I got stuff on the screen for a little bit of time and I might think that I'm keeping it up for too long. So I pull it back because I don't want to be redundant. Right. But then I look at it and I'm like, oh man, I should have kept that up longer. But in my mind, my relationship to it is like, oh, this is getting boring. This is getting stale. But I wonder sometimes if that helps because regular people, quote unquote, might not notice that. So by being hypersensitive to these changes, but by being hypersensitive to these like minor patterns, you're pulling stuff in and out to make it really interesting for them. Because you're like, I think about
next
that
level
sometimes,
Yeah. There's definitely a gray line, there's definitely a thin line. Sorry. Things can get stale. I think it's probably intuition. If you pull something out, it's probably like maybe it's not getting stale, but maybe it's not the right vibe for the music, or maybe there's the different reason that you're pulling it out. But that being said, like that's kind of the experience thing with VJing is like the more experience you have, the more you know what's working, what's not working, what people aren't going to enjoy, what people aren't going to enjoy. I mean, this has been such a great conversation. You're a really nice and super interesting dude. I also really appreciate.
I enjoy this too. I love talking. I love stuff, and I'm glad that you're doing this show. I really kudos to you, man. I'm really glad that you're doing the show, and impressed by all these episodes and stuff that you got in there. I think it's really cool, and the people you got, man. I think it's awesome.
Thank you so much, Steve. I told myself that when I get to like 52 episodes a year, I want to start having people back on the show, and you're definitely coming back because you have so much information and things to say. So we'll have to have you back one day. And thank you for spending the first portion talking about your family history. It's very interesting, and I feel like the a lot of people, what they want to see is like the artist, and they want to see the art and how they make the art and stuff like that. And I really respect that. And like I try to make a big portion of the show about that. But for me, what's most fascinating and interesting is these personal vignettes and stories, especially from people that are older that have this kind of like rich history. For me, that's the most interesting. So really, thank you for going on.
Yeah, we're
all with me on that.
We're all people, At the end of the day, like I really going back to the whole thing with the like the history and everything. These are people. These are people's stories. And at the end of the day, it's people. It's not a bunch of liquids. It's not a bunch of cool glitchy stuff. It's a human being, and it's that adventure and that all that stuff that you put into to do this. That's really what matters to me. So. Yeah, and I think a show like what you're doing is really cool because you're not just doing some tutorial or whatever. Like especially doing like a long form one is really cool because we get to like actually know you get to know more about people, and that's why I like what the other episodes I've seen about people. It's important to know that, and it makes it real, and not copyable. You can't copy that person.
Totally.
You can copy what they do. You can't copy that human being.
100%. Well, Steve, thanks very much. And is there anything you want to leave us with before we go? Definitely check out Steve's website. We'll have a link down below, his store.
Yeah, check out liquidlightshop.com. Definitely help support me. Obviously gigs, video commissions. I'm very open, and I'll work with people on whatever. So, hit me up. And be excellent to each other.
Wow, what an episode. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you to Mantis Mash for the intro and outro music. Thank you to Sophie Holder for the amazing internship helping us with all the episodes. And thank you to the guest for coming on and spending time with us. See you next week.